YouTube decided to change some of their stuff. So let's see if we're on, and if we are, then we'll proceed with our nice special guest here. Look at it. Oh, it looks like it's working. Chris Vrenna. There he is.
Hi, world.
Welcome to the world. Let's see if we can coordinate technology to work in our favor now. Okay, I think it's working. Can someone check in on the YouTube thing and tell us that it's on? Okay, there you go. It's working. Good, good, good. That's all we need. All right, it's Sunday. Welcome, everybody. Sorry for the hassle today. But, you know, we got a special guest, Chris Vrenna, in the house. Chris, it's been a while. I can't believe how fast time flies in the world these days.
I know. I know. It's shocking how quickly it goes.
You know, I was like thinking like, maybe probably the last time I saw you was when we were on tour with Tweaker Skinny Puppy. And I was thinking, oh, that's 16 years ago.
I know. Can you, I know. I think you're right. I think it was 2004. I think I came and saw you guys live somewhere, but maybe not after that. But let's just say it was 16 years ago. I know. Can you believe it's been 16 years?
I can't. It's just like the world needs to slow down. You're currently in Alabama, you were saying.
I am. I'm in Huntsville.
What are you currently doing there in Alabama?
Well, one of the newest things in my world is I'm a college professor.
See that?
So, I started teaching in 2013. 2012 and 2013 were pretty dark. Manson, I was with Manson from right after the Tweaker tour up until about 2011 or so. And in that 7 years, you know, we did 2 records together, him and I and Twiggy, and then, you know, different people were in and out, but it was the 3 of us doing everything for the most part. And man, things just got really dark. And my own personal issues, you know, basically I flipped. I mean, it was just, what do you want to call it? Cocaine overdose? You know, I don't know. But, you know, the drugs and the alcohol took their toll. At the same time that was happening, I also was in the gym. Believe it or not, I was actually in the gym. I would do a line of below and go to the gym and work out. Like, can you, like, I'm an idiot. Like, kids, you know. So, but one of the times I was in the gym, I had a trainer and I tore out my rotator cuff. Badly tore it out. From all those years of drumming, just did me in. And so I needed a big change. So I couldn't tour for a year because I was in rehab for a year getting my shoulder back. So and I did have tours lined up for that year. And I was going to be Joey Jordenson's keyboard player for his solo project tour, and I was going to be the drummer for this Italian band that I was producing. They're called Army of the Universe, and I was producing. And when I could play drums with them, I would. Otherwise, I just have it on tape because it's more of a DJ electro thing. But they were coming to America to open for KMFDM, so I was gonna be their drummer on that tour. I couldn't do anything. Long story short, I kind of fell into teaching college by accident and fell in love with it. And I've been doing that now for 8 years.
Wow.
So I was in Wisconsin for 5 years, and now I've been in Alabama for 3 years teaching.
8
Crazy.
years. Come on.
It's really weird, dude, to be a professor. Yeah, it's really weird, but I have to say, I find it incredibly rewarding. And
I gather you're teaching music and things about it. What's your approach?
The new nomenclature for what we do is called music technology.
All right.
So that's, you know, audio engineering and mixing, Pro Tools, Ableton Live, you know, which are the 2 softwares that I'm teaching. I'm doing a class right now called Audio for Visual Media, which is about working with time code and frame rate. And I got a couple of those, you know, those 8-track hard disk field recorders, the Zooms, you know, boom mics, the whole thing, wireless lavs, so that they can get an experience for what it would be like if they wanted to go into post-production. So we were doing that with sound effects, and then, you know, the final module will be scoring. So they're going to have to like watch a scene and like lay out a tempo map that hits the key frames of what they want to do. So I'm teaching that class right now as well, but it's my program. I'm the head of it. So I kind of designed it myself. So I also have a MIDI production and synthesis class, which is where I teach Ableton, and we focus more on MIDI. And then the second half of it is all about programming synths. You know those little Roland boutiques that they've been doing, the little hardware things with the batteries and the speakers? I own every single one of them they make. Every one. I bought every single one of them. Both versions of the Juno and the Jupiter. And, I'm looking at the SEO2, Studio Electronics one.
Those are great.
I have just about enough of those that everybody in the class can have their own little real synthesizer.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so, they can use it, the SH101, the 808 and the 909. So they learn old school stringing patterns together like we used to have to do back in the day. So it's a little bit of everything, all encompassing.
Will you take like an instrument one day and say, okay, today we're going to learn the 808, or today we're going to learn the 909, and then let people have hands on at that point?
Exactly. Because, you'll find these young people, like right now, it's all about trap music, which, I'm not going to say what I think of trap music, but if you don't know what an 808 is and how, those sounds, you're like, I want to make trap beats. Well, then you better know what an 808 sounds like by ear, because the whole thing is tuned 808 kick drum and the skittery little hi-hat thing.
So did they get a degree once they?
It's an associate's degree. Yeah, it's a 2-year program.
Nice.
And I am 11 weeks away from my master's degree right now.
Wow, so, congrats, man.
So in December, I'll actually have my master's, and then I truly will be Professor Vrenna. That's awesome. But by getting the master's degree, it'll allow me to teach. It'll allow me to teach at the 4-year university level, which is something that I may want to get into at some point. And there's a couple schools around here who offer a couple classes in it, but you have to have a master's just because of accreditations and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, what do you have to do now to get your master's, considering what you've been through in your life? I mean, haven't you, in all practicality, earned your master's?
Funny you say that. Oh gosh, I don't know what I want to say publicly. It hasn't been the most difficult thing for me to do, given my history. I understand if you're coming from a different background, like a teaching background. A lot of people that are in my program right now, they're teachers. They teach high school band, or they want to teach college, so they want to get their master's, things like that. But it's the one. But even if I do have a lot of experience doing, what I'm being taught, it's good to just hear, how you learn different techniques from everybody you've ever worked with. Yeah. I've learned things from you. I've learned things from Al and Trent and, just everybody. You pick up little tips and tricks and go, wow, I never did it like that before. I've always done it this way. So learning different approaches to, to things, there's always a new method somewhere in there that you can learn. So, and being a teacher and seeing how I'm being taught by master's level doctorate teachers, just makes me a better teacher on top of that. So it's weird, man. Who would have thought, 1988, you'd be talking, 35 years later, whatever it is. And now I'm a college professor. It just seems bizarre.
It's crazy. Can people see your courses virtually, or is it just something they have to come to Decatur?
They have to come right now. It's all traditional face-to-face. One of my after I get my master's, and because of COVID, we had to switch online really quick, and my master's degree is online. So it's given me a lot of background in how I can actually offer classes virtually at my school, at my college. So somewhere in the future, I am going to do an all online rewrite. But as you know, it's just, you can watch YouTube on how to program an 808 or how to mic a drum set, but until you're in the room and you're putting the mic on a snare and the boom stand's falling and you figuring out, cables are a mess, and then something isn't working because you've got a bad channel on the snake, somewhere on the patch panel, or you patched it to the wrong channel by accident, or your input path was set wrong in Pro Tools. It's really kind of hard to just watch tutorials. You need to have hands on. You need to be able to hear what it is, what you're doing as you do it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I needed a tutorial today on the new YouTube and it wasn't available.
What were you gonna learn? Wait, were you gonna do a tutorial?
No, it was like today, YouTube, as I was saying earlier, they decided to switch and
Oh yeah.
take away the streaming classic. So it's basically what I need is the YouTube URL to be able to put it up on Patreon so that people can follow it. And then they don't give that to you now, the classic. So it's like, it's this thing we all go online. Okay, how do I find the look? And it's like, this guy's online. He's like, welcome to the YouTube. It's like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. The virtual assistant will be with you shortly. Type in your issue, and then you type it in, and it
Oh.
Have you read these 17 articles that have nothing to do with what is going wrong right now? You know, Facebook just did that. They came in with that new Facebook design, and I kept going Facebook Classic for as long as I could. And then the other day or last week, it was
You had to.
now you have to be in the new thing, and like every button's new, and it's all different parts of the page, and I don't understand why they do that. I mean, you know, like all it does is piss off your users because they get comfortable with where things are and they can do it quickly and efficiently. Yes. And then they got to go hunt and peck, like, where are my groups at? Where is this at? Where's my YouTube link at now? And it's just, I don't know.
So congratulations on the induction into the Hall of Fame. This is another great achievement for a good buddy of ours, Chris. Good to see you've come a long way. And so let me just confirm, you were the drummer on the Nine Inch Nails tour when we toured together in '88.
Oh yeah, it was me and Trent, and then I was of course supposed to. No, I wasn't the drummer. Sorry, I wanted to play drums obviously because that's my instrument. But we had a friend of ours named Ron Massara, and he was also a drummer, but he was mostly a live front of house guy around Cleveland. He was a good friend of ours at the time, and we, so we're like, let's get Ron to play drums. You play keyboards.
Oh.
So I think about that tour all the time, to be honest with you. It's just one of those defining moments of my life, not to just be an ass kiss for a second, but when one of the bands that you worship more than anything, like, invites you out for 6 dates, we had never played live. We weren't even thinking about how to play live still. And it was only because our manager at the time was in talks with Network about possibly signing Nine Inch Nails to Network. And obviously it didn't work out in the end, but so that's how we got that gig. Was Network was like, hey, they need an opener for the East Coast leg. Why don't you guys just go do it? And we're like, okay. But that first show was a Thursday, and we got that call like on a Saturday or a Sunday. So we didn't sleep for 3 days. Oh man, we just had so we put the backing tracks on the big reel-to-reel, the Tascam 8-track, and at the time, I was using Trent's Emulator 2, I think it was. I don't even think it was it. Maybe it was the Emax 1, but I thought it was the Emulator 2. And then I had a rolling Octapad to play extra stuff. And that we put that whole thing together in like 3.5 days, piled into Trent's Honda Civic. It was a hatchback. It was the 2-door hatch. And we drove to Pittsburgh, and that was that. We did those dates with you guys. And
funny, I remember the sound check in Pittsburgh because I was talking with one of my friends, and we were sitting there, and then, like, somehow you guys had already had a buzz about you, though. I don't know.
I don't know where it came from or how or why.
There was a buzz, and so we were like, I remember seeing you guys there, and you guys were I wish I could remember more.
And I remember every minute of it. It's like,
you're gonna have to fill me in then.
I was never so, like, that may have been the most nervous I think I've ever been playing. Not because I hadn't played live before, but we were trying to do something so fast, and you don't want to come off looking horrible in front of a band like Puppy. So it was just one. No,
you guys didn't come across as horrible. You guys were the best band that we had on that tour. I think we had like several different changing bands, and we got together with you guys, and we having a lot of fun. And then somehow you guys had to leave or something. I don't know what it was, but
well, I think we were only confirmed for Pittsburgh, New York. No, maybe it wasn't New York. No, because New York we played nightclub on our own. It was New York, Philly, Shitty Gardens in Trenton, New Jersey.
So what happened there? I remember. Did we get kicked out? Did we get kicked out of the venue?
I don't know what happened, and I don't remember, like, I don't know. I honestly don't remember. I just remember, like,
I thought
something happened there.
I thought we went there, and then something happened where we did something stupid backstage, and they kicked. I thought what happened one time at City Gardens where we got kicked out.
Really?
We were told we couldn't play, and then the band that we were playing with, which was either you or the next time, was told that they could play. But I remember you guys coming out and giving me a bottle of champagne before I was leaving, and I was thinking, wait, was it that time? Do you remember if that was?
I have a picture, and I went to look for it today, but all of my photo albums are packed up somewhere. But I snuck a picture of you at soundcheck at City Gardens, standing at your keyboard rig, and you're wearing. I want to say, I'm gonna find it. I'll scan it and I'll email it to you. I want to say it was like a bowler, you know, like an English bowler hat, and a Troop jacket. Remember Troop?
Troop, yeah.
Because I was wearing one on tour as well, and I mean that was the first thing I was like, oh my god, Kevin's wearing a Troop jacket. I can't wear this now. I can't, you know. I mean, obviously you didn't wear it during your show, and I did, but that was the first thing I remember. Was like, oh my god, we're both into Troop wear. Yeah, like, only two white guys. Probably.
Yeah, no, it's so funny.
Oh my god! So I have a picture of you in your Troop jacket and this hat, like just at your rig. I gotta find it and send it to you. But it was taken at City Gardens. They had that really high, weird stage. And
yeah, I remember I came in that day at City Gardens. I do remember, and I had gotten the Troop gear, and you guys all looked at me like, because I was with my friend Chris Shepard. He was like kind of more of a hip hop dude, and so I got the jumpsuit. I had like an orange jumpsuit, and I had like the runners and the jacket. And I came in, you guys just looked at me like, what the fuck?
Because Trump used to tease me because I would have to go to like the east side of Cleveland, you know, down on like Euclid Avenue to find that stuff, because it was really only sold in the black neighborhood areas, you know. And so he used to just tease me all the time, like, dude, your style. And I'm like, dude, I'm telling you, man, it's all about Troop.
Yeah, I remember the Halloween show was really great that we did with you in New York.
Yeah, that was New York. Was that it? What was that?
Irving Plaza.
Oh, that's right. It was Irving Plaza. You're right.
And I think we were with Controlled Bleeding as well that night too, right?
I think so.
Yeah. And I remember, I don't know if it was through your set or something, I was watching on the side, and then someone was from the very back of the audience, walked across everybody all the way up to the stage, walking across shoulders. And they had a mask on, like some scary mask, but they had literally managed to walk across people's shoulders. I never have seen that before or again since.
I love shows at that era, you know, the 80s. There's just something about all the shows I saw back then and those early shows. I don't know, there was an energy that it's hard. I don't know if it's the internet or the fact that nobody buys records, so they don't have as much of a vested interest in their music as when you used to have to go search the bins and find stuff. But there was an energy back then that is still, to me anyway, unrivaled. Some of the experiences. You know, the other funny thing about that tour was every day you guys would be loading up the black Labrador Retriever dog that was going to be vivisected in the middle of the show, and just the waft of marijuana coming out of the dressing room every day, you know. And I remember walking by one day, me and Sean were walking by one day, and you had your dressing room door open, and you guys were all stuffing whatever you were using to stuff that dog with, gigantic joints, like rusted joints. And it was just, we were just like, well, that's something you just don't see every day.
That was the green guy.
And
that's what everyone always asks, who's the green guy? Oh, that was that big stick.
And the same thing happened on the Tweaker tour in 2004. We were playing Chicago when we were opening for you. I forgot. I don't know if it was Cab Metro. I can't remember what venue we were playing that day. We were in that crazy Days Inn there that everybody always stayed at, kind of junky right by the L. And the cops got called because the whole floor reeked of marijuana. The minute those elevator doors opened, I was like, oh my God, those guys, man. It's like somebody that's not affiliated with us is gonna be pissed about this. And they did.
We've always been kind of known for that smell following us around. We're never quite sure where it comes from. You know, it's just part of the job. I remember Trent being really, really shy on that tour. I don't remember him being very. I don't remember him speaking too much backstage. Was he quiet back then?
Yeah, and you know what's weird? He still is. I mean,
Yeah.
he's like one of those kind of guys. He's just always been kind of like, I don't know if it's shyness, or I guess maybe it is a form of shyness. He's just like that. Always has been. Still, I just talked to him on the phone, last month or so about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, when that all happened, and he emailed and said, "Hey, can we talk? What's your number?" And but he's still just a very kind of quiet, keeps to himself. Never really liked the spotlight, even though it's all spotlight for him. He was never comfortable with that part of the fame part of it. Being successful is one thing, but that public part of it was just never really all that cool with.
Did you guys have a band together before Nine Inch Nails? Was it called the Exotic Birds or something?
Yeah. That was the first band. That band was around. Oh man, this is another great Skinny Puppy story. Holy crap. So 1986, I started going to college. I had met Trent when I was in high school in 1985. And the way I met him was, I'm from Erie, and then an hour south of me is a city called Meadville, and then an hour south of that is Mercer, where he's from, and then like 40 minutes south of that is Pittsburgh, all along the I-79 corridor there. So I was playing in a band in Meadville, and my keyboard player was he was older than me. His name was John Trevethan, and he owned a PPG Wave 2.3, which still, if I could get my hands on one of those, I'd love a real one. He had a Mirage, he was learning hexadecimal programming on that stupid Mirage thing. Forgot what else he had, but the PPG was the one because Geddy Lee always had a PPG, and so the minute I was like, oh my god. So he knew Trent, and I had an 808, and I had a DMX, and I had a Simmons 5 analog, and I had a Simmons 8, and so I was all Simmons and all electronics. And so he told me one day, he's like, hey, my buddy Trent's selling his Lynn drum down in Mercer. And I was like, well, I got to buy it, because I got to have a Lynn drum. He had put ZIF sockets in so he could change the chips. And so we drove to Meadville, and I bought Trent's Lynn off of him. It was in 1985, and I was still in high school. And that's how I met him, was buying his Lynn drum. But we became instant friends. And then, because Trent was buying the Lynn 9000, he was selling the Lynn to get the 9000, which unfortunately that thing never worked. That thing it actually put Lynn out of business.
I think so.
Bankrupted him. So I end up at Kent State, which is just south of Cleveland, Kent, Ohio, Fort Ed in Ohio. And Trent was up in Cleveland playing in the Birds, and the drummer for the Exotic Birds he quit. So, and I used to drive up and watch the Birds play every show they did. So Trent calls me, and he's like, hey man, Tom Freer, the original drummer, quit. He's like, want to come up and audition? And I was like, sure. And he's like, how about Friday night? And we'll go out afterwards. I was like, all right. This was 86. So I drove up to Cleveland. I already knew all the songs. And the guitar player was Andy Kubashevsky, who went on to be the drummer. He's a classically trained drummer. He went on to drum for The.
Wow.
And he went on to drum for Stabbing Westward with Chris Hall and all those guys at Stabbing Westward. And he wrote some of their biggest hits. And now he does television composing. I think he does a lot of Discovery Network stuff. But anyway, so I drive up to Cleveland, set up the drums. We play through the songs, and Andy and Trent they're like, all right, you got the gig. And I was like, woo. So, all right, so let's go celebrate. We're a band. So we're going to go get Szechuan and then go see this band play tonight called Skinny Puppy. They're playing at Peabody's Down Under in the Flats. And I was like, Skinny Puppy. I'm like, what the hell's that? And so you were promoting Mind Perpetual Intercourse. And so they played me a little bit of the record. I went, holy God, this shit is crazy. This is weird. And so we went and saw that show. We saw that tour. That was the first time I ever saw Puppy, was 86 on my.
I would have been with Severed Heads.
Was it? Were they the opener on that?
Yeah.
Holy crap, I didn't even remember. Wow. I love Severed Heads.
Oh, they were fantastic too.
Such a cool band.
Way ahead of their time.
Way ahead. Way ahead. I mean, one of their songs just came up on my Discover Weekly for some odd reason on Spotify a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, man, it still sounds like. Have you heard the new Cabaret Voltaire single?
I briefly, yeah.
Yeah, they have like one new, like a 12-inch out, and the album's coming out later. And it sounds like the Code era Cabaret Voltaire.
Right, right.
Like, yeah, you listen to Severed Head stuff, and you're like, man, it still sounds current in 2020. It still sounds like, you know, like it could have been written like last week. But your show freaked us out so freaking bad because the fake death thing at the end.
Oh, right. Was it
and on that tour, what's that? The assassination, yes. And on that tour, people, I don't know if you remember people. It was a tiny little club. I mean, it was sold out. It was hot as heck in there. And the last song, like the assassination was this douchebag wearing a painter's cap and a Cleveland Browns, like he's some frat boy, gets up on stage, and we were like, whoa, get this asshole off stage. He's clearly in the wrong club. He was drunk off his ass, holding the beer bottle, like, you guys, fuck you guys. And then Ogre's like trying to push him off and everything, and the guy smashes the bottle in Ogre's face. Ogre goes down, tries to get up, blood gushing down his face. You guys just kind of finish the last song, you and Dwayne looking at each other, just kind of finish up and then walk off stage, and security runs out and grabs Ogre. And we left that venue going like, Jesus, what the hell just happened to that singer? We had no idea that was all part of the thing.
Yeah, so that was
top 5 show I've ever seen still to this day.
That was every show. And yeah, as someone's writing, yeah, that was Dave Jackson, rest in peace. he played that part so well that I saw him take punches so many times for that people would just pounce on him and begin beating him.
Was that the thing? Like he was like just a drunk crowd goer who somehow got up on stage?
That's what he wanted to give the look of, and I think he was very successful at it.
He was, because I mean, you know, anyone wearing a painter's cap in 1986 with a hoodie with some sports team?
Oh yeah,
clearly like not supposed to be in a Skinny Puppy show. Like they you know, painter's jeans, you know, the carpenter jeans thing, just completely out of place. Brilliant, just freaking brilliant. But that was my first. It's weird how Skinny Puppy has popped up in my life at these key moments. You know, that was the day me and Trent started playing in a band together. You know, we were opening for you in '88 on Vivisect. You know, before we got signed, and then Tweaker. I only ever got to do one tour one time, and it was 2004 opening for you, and it was the only time that band ever got to tour. Which sucks because, man, the way I was doing everything live, triggering everything as loops off of pads, no sequencers allowed on stage, the way we put that whole show together, I hate to say it, but it was kind of freaking brilliant. Like the way I put the figure together, like for that tour.
I love touring with you guys. That was a fun tour.
And fans were cool, you know, like they were always receptive, even though, you know, Tweaker wasn't as heavy as some of the other stuff, you know.
I thought it was super well balanced in that sense, though. I mean, you know, I don't know. It could have gone and gone and gone. You know, these things always come and then they end too quickly.
Yeah.
Was there a time after Skinny Puppy when you saw us in '86 and then you were with Trent when you started? Did you guys ever do the Chicago thing? You went down to Chicago and were with D. Warzaw and Stabbing West.
We did. Yeah, I did, I should say. So we went to Chicago. I've always loved Chicago. It's still my favorite city in America. I know the winters are brutal because I lived there through like 3 of them, but man, I just love that city. The music scene, the alternative side of it, the food, public transportation is dialed. Plus, you get the really nice Midwestern people. You don't get, you know, New York in your face assholes, and then you got LA people talk behind your back ass. You know what I mean? It's like, so I just loved living there. So we the first time we went there, me and Trent drove up there while we were like in '86 or '87 to see the Revolting Cocks and Lena Levitch at the old Medusa's Lounge.
Yeah.
It was a show for PETA. So we actually managed to get tickets and saw the Cocks on the, you know, the first album, Big Sexy Land. And then we went up to do that remix with Al, which was the B-side of Sin, the Get Down, Make Love cover. We did that at Chicago Track Studio on Halstead with the little 32-channel SSL they had back then. And that was a trip and a half. And then, so after the Pretty Hate Machine touring, Trent wanted to move to, he wanted to go to New Orleans, and I wanted to go to Chicago. And we both had personal reasons for picking those cities because we had never really seen America before.
Yeah.
And so, so we kind of went, and he did Prick, that Prick album during that time. And I did Diverso, the Big Electric Metal Bass Face tour, the second tour. And I lived with those guys when I was there. And then I ended up joining KMFDM on the Money album. And I was their drummer for the Money tour, which that tour was both those tours were fantastic, getting to play with different people. I loved living there. It was a really good time. Wax Trax record store was still kind of going, and Halstead was still there, and the whole, I just really liked it. I lived behind Wrigley with Jimmy, Jim from Diverso, Jimmy and Vandy.
Nice.
They shared a house. It was like a commune. It was us, and James Woolley was their keyboard player, who went on to he was Nine Inch Nails keyboard player for a little stint during Downward Spiral. Rest his soul. He passed away a few years back now.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. James, yeah. God, I forget how long it was now. It was like some weird freak accident in his home. And,
Weird.
yeah, he left a wife and 2 kids.
Wow.
It's really sad. So I did the Chicago thing for a while, and then I'm trying, that's when I was in Stabbing Westward at the beginning, because Christopher Hall, the singer, was also in Diverso on that tour. So that's how how that Chicago scene was. It was a big.
Yeah. How'd you ever get out of it?
I love that, man. That early '90s Chicago era of Wax Trax and industrial scene coming out of Chicago was just so cool.
Yeah.
But then Trent, called, and he's like, all right, we got to make a new record. He's like, I've got, parts of, this EP done. So we're going to go to LA. And so I told Stabbing Westward, I'm like, I love you guys, but I'm going to go to LA. And that's when we, went to the Sharon Tate house and all that.
What was your vibes about that? Did you feel safe in that house, or did you ever get creeped out?
We never really got creeped out by that place, except for twice. 2 things happened in the house that are unexplainable.
Except for the flying head.
Yeah. I wish it was something that cool. I would really love it to be that cool. But there was one night where we finished, Flood was in, so Flood was staying in the guest room. So Trent lived in the master room of the main house, and I lived where Stephen Parent was in the guest house, So I was in his room. So there was one night where we were done working. It was about midnight, and I closed up the studio, and I'm walking across the front yard, and there was this shot, there was an outline of a shadow, and like someone's shining a flashlight, and you get the outline of a body. And this person was wearing like a corseted dress, like a hoop skirt, kind of billowy, and clearly female. And I was like, it wasn't my outline for sure. And I turned around thinking there was somebody, because we used to get people sneaking into the property, not usually because they were Nine Inch Nails fans, usually because they were Charles Manson fans. And so we had to kind of keep up on that. That was kind of a nightmare. But anyway, I turn around, there's nobody there. I turn back around and the light turns off, and it goes away. And I'm like, okay, well, that's weird. And I go to bed, and the next morning I'm telling Trent and Flood while we're making coffee, and Trent goes, right after you left? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, his dog Maisie had a big yellow lab, Maisie, who went everywhere with us, like tour home, like she was with us everywhere. He said that he was working on lyrics in bed, and she just out of a dead sleep stood up in bed, bristled up, and started howling at the ceiling. And for no reason at all, for a couple of minutes, and then she settled back down. That happened to her the same exact time that weird image happened to me. And we just all kind of looked at each other like, okay, let's just never speak of this again. So that was the first one. And then the second one was Tori Amos was up at the house one time. Trent and Tori had become friends. And so he was saying backgrounds on one of her songs, and she was going to sing backgrounds on something we were doing. So she came up to the Tate house they were going to track both their vocals that night. So to thank us, she had brought over some chicken, and she was going to cook us dinner. And she put the chicken, preheats the oven, puts the chicken in the oven. No joke about this at all. 90 minutes, 2 hours later, chicken's still raw. Like, it just never cooked. And it wasn't like the oven was cold. You would tell if the oven pilot went off. She got so freaked out that she was like, I got to go. And she just left. Like, she just left. And that was enough. That was that. It like freaked her out. So that was it. Oh, just those 2 things. But other than that, it was just a house.
I guess we kind of skipped over Pretty Hate Machine in the way that album kind of, not many people talk about Adrian Sherwood and like how brilliant that must have been to have like a period of time where you make a vision, and then Adrian helps you to just kick it right out of the park.
Yeah, he is a freaking hero, man. Him and Keith LeBlanc, all that Tack Head sound system, that whole group of guys, man, that just is so cool. He's so cool. I just saw on Facebook his daughter just put a record out.
Yeah.
I gotta listen. I haven't listened to it yet, but I gotta check that out. I mean, Twitch was one of those records that when you got Twitch, you partly didn't understand it, but partly were just so blown away by the sound of it and the mixture of the dub and the delays and how that worked with the distortion and in the industrial part of that whole thing. That was just one of those records that's like, and for Al, it was just like with sympathy, Twitch, and then straight on to Land of Rape and Honey, which is, kind of like punk, for a lot of it. So, having him on that record, and John Fryer did some tracks, just having those names associated with it, it was just so cool.
Did Trent actually do like the Al thing and go over to England and work there? Or was that something that Adrian did kind of like?
He did it on his own and sent it back. Trent did go to England to work with John Fryer, though, on the tracks over there. And then we had a couple of those tracks like reworked by Sherwood. And those mixes were the ones that ended up being the actual album versions of the songs. Was he in London back then? I guess he was still in London. And he wasn't in, I don't remember getting the Down In It thing back and like all those, all the Sherwoody stuff. And it was just like, jaw hits the floor. There's something special when your heroes like actually work on something you've done, or you get somehow like that with them and you're hearing it.
I just think, really from that point forward, that was like the winning move. And then so really everything you guys have done since has been win-win-win as far as like your ability to work with some of the greatest producers and some of the greatest artists that have been in turn inspired by what, the road that you're on. And it must have, in hindsight, it must feel amazing to even think back about all of the crossroads that you've been involved with. I mean, you've worked with practically every. Chris Vrenna's worked with every band.
I know, it's pretty freaking weird, dude. I know. And I mean, Flood has, after I quit Nine Inch Nails, everything I've done in my career, when I would work with anybody, all I did was channel what Flood did and what I watched Flood do.
Really?
I've worked with producers. I'm not going to say who, but you can. Huge name. And I was producing this young band, and the keyboard player, the main guy in the band, his hero was this one producer mixer. So we had the label approach, and this person, and they were like, I'll do 3 songs, for like super. I mean, this guy was making 7,500 to 10K a mix, type of person. And he did like 3 songs. So we give him the tracks. We come into the studio, famous studio in LA, famous room in famous studio in LA. And so I'm like, we're ready to hear the, the mix and everything. And I'm looking around the room, and every kick drum, I'm not even joking, 8 different compressors are all firing, every snare drum, there are more lights lighting up on more outboard pieces. And I'm like, there's no way that all of that is happening, on this stuff. A, it's partly to impress the client. So we think there's a whole lot going on. B, so you don't know exactly which one is really the one that's actually working. So you can't steal the trick. And, when we were working with Flood on Spiral, when he came to LA for a few months, we got to Eventide 4000 had just come out.
Nice.
And it was that new one that you could program. You remember that jump from the 35 to the 4 was a huge leap with the, So right. Flood, that's his favorite toy. So one night, Flood was just sitting there dialing, and he was trying to make a delay from the ground up himself, patching together all the little things. That thing was a nightmare to program. But I stayed up with him all night, and I'm like, anytime I would say, Flood, what are you doing? He would hit stop on whatever it was, and and my nickname was Pod Boy back then, and he'd go, well, Pod Boy, let me show you. And he would just stop work and walk me through everything he was doing and take the time to answer my question about, whether it was a mix thing or, piece of, like whatever it was. And like, that's the kind of person I want to be, is like, you know, what harm is there in doing that? So I've always, like, everything I've done is try to model. Plus, if you think about Flood, like, you can, I mean, taste is a thing, but, you know, Depeche Mode, Violator, Nitzareb, Belief, PJ Harvey, To Bring You My Love, Downward Spiral. I mean, it's like every band's best record was produced by Flood, because he doesn't have his sound and he shoehorns every band. He just makes every band be the best that band is naturally. And that's always been my approach. He's ungodly to me, you know? So yeah, as far as working with people.
Methodology and anything that you carry with you as far as when you track or something that you apply?
Not so much about that. It's like, because because Flood wasn't also the most like technical dude. You know, he had Alan Moulder with him, who's, you know, God, just again.
What a shame.
Like, yeah, I know. Poor Flood. He only has Alan do all the engineering and mixing. You know, and Trent still works with Alan to this day. He still makes stuff. But so it was more about how to handle myself in the studio environment and how to treat other people. Watching how people work, you know, picking up work ethic. You know, I've worked with people who just, you know, I don't know, they're 2 hours late and they just want to leave early, or they just want to get messed up on something. And, you know, just kind of helped me become a man. You know, that's the kind of stuff I try to bring to everybody. Oh, I also forgot he produced Achtung Baby for U2. So, you know, I'm forgetting the whole discography, but, you know, usually it's memorized. But yeah, just, you know, it's one of those things where Nine Inch Nails just, I mean, Trent's freaking brilliant. What are you going to say? You know, the guy's a great songwriter, had his sound. It just always seemed to work. To me, in a way, like Pretty Hate Machine especially, that's clearly the most pop of all the records. But it was one of those things where if it wasn't for, you know, the records, me and Trent, when we were roommates in Cleveland for years, like 5 or 6 years, and when I had an Emax 1, and we would sit on the floor in our apartment sampling kick drums and snare drums off of Nitzareb records and off of Puppy records and off of all of those, you know, those, anytime you could get a by itself, you know, and you had to do your ear and you're counting sample numbers on the slider, you know, no waveform editing or anything at that point. You know, those, you know, the Ministry, Puppy, Nitzareb, Papa Weed itself, This Is the Day, This Is the Hour, This Is This record, which Flood produced. Totally forgot about that one. Flood produced that one too. You know, and I'm still friends with Clint Mansell. You know, he's gone on to be a huge film composer. But there was just, I don't know, it was just something, if it wasn't for all that stuff, it was like Nine Inch Nails just kind of took it all. I don't want to say made it pop, but there was a pop sensibility to the way Trent just always wrote songs. And if you can ever get your hands on early, those Exotic Birds records, especially the second one that Trent was on, Lou Oiseau, I mean, they're straight up 80s new wave pop songs. So it was just kind of packaged in a different format that maybe, you know, some people could understand better than, you know.
Yeah. So your graduation, sort of, so to speak, down to the Nothing Studios in New Orleans, that was like a sort of like the group had to sort of migrate to this center of what would become the new center of activity for you for a few years, I take it.
Long time, yeah. Trent loved New Orleans. That's where he went after Pretty Hate Machine when I was in Chicago, and when I went to Chicago, like we just talked about. He just always loved that city, loved the vibe of it, and he thought wrongly, but he thought that a city like that, you didn't have to worry about walking around in public and just people bugging you about who you are. But the truth of the matter is, in a small city, people do that more often. You know, the thing about LA is you see a swing a dead cat and you get a celebrity, you know, like somewhere. Yeah. So people are really numb to seeing celebrities, and they usually just leave you alone, which is now where Trent lives. But at that time, he just loved that city. So yeah, we all went down. He bought an old funeral home and we turned, you know, it had like 3 different big viewing rooms, and we turned one into the control room A, one into control room B, and the third one into a live room that we could track in, and that we could also rehearse in. You know, we had a small PA in there, and so when we needed to go out on the road, we would use it for rehearsing. For the Bowie tour in '95, you know, we did all of our pre-production there. But that's where we also produced and did Antichrist Superstar with Manson. God, who else? Oh, Coil came down there one time.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was you know, it was Peter and John. They were both there, and that was cool. They were just using the studio because, you know, Trent had Nothing Records, so
yeah.
You know, he had Clint Mansell come down for a while, and Clint Mansell did Pi while he was in New Orleans, the movie Pi, and that's what set his career off on a different path. So we got to work with a lot of cool bands that came through there. But it was, you know, Manson, the whole band moved there too. Just imagine Nine Inch Nails and Manson in New Orleans where bars never close. I mean, it was.
Oh, I can't imagine. I mean, it kind of seemed like the Chicago vibe kind of like morphed into the New Orleans vibe with you guys at this point.
It kind of did. I never thought about that, you know. It was just that's where Trent wants to go, and you know, he's the man. So I'm sure I'll go to New Orleans. I have lived more places, you know, that it never really bothered me where I was, because I figured wherever it is I live, I'm going to be in the studio 90% of my time anyway. And if I'm not in the studio, chances are we're going to be on the road. So, you know, I've ever since I left my hometown of Erie when I was 18, I've been fairly transient. I've always felt like LA was the place I've lived the longest. You know, if you count the 2 years for Downward Spiral, and then after I did leave the band and move back, it was close to 20 years total time that I was in LA. So, you know.
And what's your impression of LA now?
Well, behind me, I have NFL Red Zone on. I don't care what you people think. I love NFL. That's my sports ball. I moved there in '97, so 2 years after we lost both the Rams and the Raiders. I left there in 2013 when I moved to Wisconsin. 2 years after I leave, we get the Rams back and the Chargers. I was like, oh, seriously? I mean, I'd have season tickets to one of those two teams at that stadium you guys just built, that $3 billion thing down there is unbelievable looking on TV. It must be, once they let people in, you know, once you're actually allowed in, it must be amazing. And they're going to build an arena next to there. When I left LA, it was getting pretty rough. A lot of my friends were going through hard times. I was going through a hard time. The cost of living got really, you know, like in the last decade, the cost of living really took off out there. You know, I always told people that for the second biggest city in America, it's actually quite affordable to live, you know, cost of living out there. But wow, you know, those
especially in '97. In '97, it was dirt cheap here to live.
It was dirt cheap. I know. I had an awesome place in Los Feliz, and you know, I had a 2,000 square foot house for, you know, $1,500 or something at one point, 4-car garage. Now it's a studio is going to run you $1,500, and you know, 2 bedrooms like pushing $3K.
I wouldn't recommend it to anybody.
I wouldn't myself anymore, which is a shame. But you know, there was that time where you had to be there because all the labels were there, all the management companies were there. For me, when I got into game scoring, EA was there. You know, all the big game companies were based there. It was just one of those things where your manager would call you and say, "Hey, you know, DreamWorks wants to have a meeting. Can you get over there at 3:00 this afternoon?" And you just said, "Sure," and you just hopped in your car and you did it. But now everything's become so decentralized with the internet and the rapid decline of the music industry in general. That
you've been incredibly prolific as far as like how if you look at your timeline, it's like you can see that you served your tenure in Nine Inch Nails up until about the time when it seemed like other opportunities were all of a sudden just on your plate more so. Is that really what took you away?
Things got pretty dark around that time, you know, from like 96 through 2000 got pretty dark down there for everybody. People were fighting addiction issues. Things just, I was burnt out. I don't know how I remained an alcoholic / drug addict for yet another 20 years after that, but it seemed like I was hitting my own thing down there, and I just hit this wall, and I just couldn't do it, and I just wanted to try some other stuff, and so LA. The funny thing was, I went to LA without really I didn't go there for a particular gig or anything, but I remember it like it was yesterday. It was right around New Year's, 97 going into 98, and I was unpacking my apartment. So because it was late 97 was when I went out to LA, and I was still hanging up curtains. I had football on the TV, whatever game was on. It was a Sunday, and I was still hanging drapes, and my phone rings, and it was the Smashing Pumpkins'
Right.
tour manager named Gooch. And he called and said, "Hey, I hear you're out in LA, and and I was like, "Yeah, what's going on?" And he's like, "Well, at that time, remember Jonathan Melvoin, their keyboard player, OD'd and died on tour. Jonathan did, and that's when they kicked Jimmy Chamberlain out of the band because of the heroin problem and everything else, and bad time for the Pumpkins. But so the Billy had to do a bunch of makeup dates with the new drummer and stuff that they had to cancel due to the death. But he also had a whole bunch of movie stuff he had to do for the Batman movie. And so I was asked if I wanted to go on the road and not be in the band or anything, but be a touring studio MIDI facilitator for Billy. So I put together a laptop Mac rig running Studio Vision Pro. This was 98. Billy was the king of the Kurzweil K2500 rack module, a couple cents. And so every day I would get my own little room in the arena or in my hotel room, and I'd set the whole thing up, and Billy would come in and he'd work on tracks that we needed to get recorded when we got back to Chicago. And then I'd pack up the whole rig while they were on stage, and then I'd ride in the bus and then do it all over so that Billy could do studio work by day, tour by night. And so I was there for 6 months. I was with Billy almost 6 months. And then one day from my hotel room in Chicago, I check in my machine back in LA, and Axl Rose called. And because Robin Fink had quit Nine Inch Nails before I even did. And then Robin Fink was in Cirque du Soleil.
Right.
And so then from Cirque du Soleil, Axl actually recognized Robin Fink in Cirque du Soleil and was like, "That's the dude from Nine Inch Nails, I swear it." And afterwards they went down, and sure enough, they were right. And so he became the guitar player for Guns N' Roses. And then after Matt Sorum quit, Axl called me to come down and also join the band. So I was the first drummer in Guns N' Roses, I guess, after Matt Sorum had quit. Wow. I only lasted a few months. I was the first of 6 guys that came in and out of that band. But so when I did get to LA, things took off really fast for me.
I know Pittman. Chris Pittman. He
sure.
eventually ended up working for Axl for quite a number of years, and he made it sound like it wasn't the easiest job.
It was not an easy job. I mean, just the hours, the all-night hours alone.
Got to be up all night.
You could be up all night. Maybe you'd be just about like ready to hang it up at like 4 o'clock in the morning. Like, screw it, Axl's not coming. And all of a sudden, the phone would ring and be like, "He wants to come. He's on his way." We're like, "Damn it! I thought I could get home before sunup tonight."
Why do they always want to work that late? I have never figured that out.
Because I start my classes at 8 a.m. So I get up at 5 a.m. And if you hear any squeaking in the background, that's Otis, my dog, underneath the console, which is his favorite. He's got a little nest of blankets under the console, and that's where he likes to hang out when I make
My cat's squeaking over there too.
I know you're a cat guy. You got to have a studio pet,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All the time. So we, that was a really, really, really rough gig, and eventually they gave me a contract, like if I wanted to sign on, and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. It was like something I just got out of, I just couldn't do that. Moby was there. Moby was going to produce the band. So I can't tell you how many all night conversations me and Moby just had sitting around drinking coffee, wondering if Axl was going to show up.
Moby was going to produce.
Yeah. Axl wanted Moby to produce. So he would come down every night for a few months. Yeah. So, and then I ran into Moby at the weirdest vegan brunch at this actress's house who used to be on the TV show House. And Moby was there, and I went up to him. I'm like, "You're not gonna remember me." He's like, "I totally remember you, dude. Guns N' Roses, Jesus." And we started to talk like just how insane that 6 months of our lives were. I will say though, Axl has a very open, like he loves all kind of music. You know, like even going back, like in the Paradise City, he's wearing in some of the shots, he's wearing a Nine Inch Nails T-shirt in that music video. So it's clear that like he loved U2, the Passengers album. His tastes were very wide, which I have to applaud him for. Unfortunately, his own fan base didn't really share some of his, wide-ranging, a record produced by Moby with half a Nine Inch Nails as the band probably wouldn't have gone over very well for him.
In a way, it's sort of like to be expected in the industry is that, the new stars of the industry kind of be injected into the old guys that need some sort of like help in some way.
Yeah.
Before we skip ahead with in your history, it's important to point out, you guys won a Grammy for your best metal performance at Woodstock, and also, I mean, come on, touring with David Bowie and collaborating. I mean, I don't think there's a musician's goal or dream that can be higher attained than that. I mean, that experience in itself. I talked to Charlie about it. It's got to be something you put on in your life and say, come on, of course, it's never going to be probably topped.
Yeah, that is a true bucket list moment. That whole tour. Yeah. Somebody recently sent me a couple of photos from it that I hadn't seen. And the way we did the crossover in the middle where there was not a set change.
Yeah.
We did that weird, everything was on rolling risers and, having, me playing drums for Scary Monsters with Carlos Alomar standing on my drum riser, with me, Scary, hitting my cymbal with the headstock of his guitar for those accents in the chorus, and then, hearing Bowie sing Reptile. And it kind of gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. The thing that sticks with you about Bowie is that he's just the nicest person that I practically ever met in my life. Just the most down-to-earth, normal, like just nice guy. It's just hard to explain. You'd expect some sort of weird, freaky art, just that's been through what he's been through and accomplished everything he's accomplished. But it was just amazing. And Iman was with him most of the time, and they just had like the greatest marriage that I've ever seen.
That's incredible.
It was just one of those things where you're like, man. It was another one of those life lessons like Flood where they just where somebody teaches you how to act, how to be
modest.
Yeah. And just like, wow, and then get to play every day like that. I mean, that was just something that was, that was an unexpected bucket list. I didn't even know I needed until I had it. We were all at SIR in New York City rehearsing the crossover 4 songs, and that was one of those things where just and his band in general. Zach Alford was his drummer, who people would know, but he was the drummer in B-52s. I think he still is. And Gaylan Dorsey, she was the bass player in Tears for Fears for a long time.
Right.
Both her and Zach were the rhythm section for Gwen Stefani's solo stuff. I mean, his whole band, it was Carlos was there from the old days. Reeves Gabrels was there. And Mike Garson was there. And, and Trent and Mike kept up a relationship. He had Mike play on piano on some Nine Inch Nails stuff much later on after I left. But it was just one of those things where you're just like humbled every day. You're just.
Who was the most amazing guest that you saw come backstage on those shows? I guess you must have the Queen of England show.
For me, anyway, it was. This may sound weird. It was Jeff Goldblum and Laura Dern because they were dating after they did Jurassic Park together. Jurassic Park was the last movie I actually saw in a theater multiple times.
Right.
I think me and Trent went and saw it like 2 or 3 times because it was just one of those things like in 1994 or whatever it came out.
That was so good.
Where you're like, the effects still hold up pretty well when it's broadcast on TV. And so they started dating, and those two come walking in together, and she's like 6 feet, and Jeff Goldblum's like 6'4", 6'5". He's a really tall dude. And I was just like one of those things. I was like, oh my God, Jurassic Park just walked into my freaking dressing room asking for beer. And it was just the coolest thing. It was the coolest thing ever. That one is the one that always sticks out for me, just because of the timing of who, the whole thing. But very nice people, by the way. Very nice.
And it's nice you guys actually got long enough to hang out and get to know these people. I mean, that's it's a very unique experience, I must imagine.
It really was. I mean, his death was, we've lost so many people in the last few years now. It's
his death really was the end of a great era. It was really the most monumental death I can think of, really, in the music industry.
Yeah, me too.
For me.
For me, definitely. And a close second for that would be Prince.
Yeah, for sure.
Sign of the Times is one of my all-time favorite records, and just the programming on it and the sounds that are on there and stuff. And, just.
So you have a writing.
I met Prince one time.
Oh, wow, you did.
I to him, and I shook his hand, and I was ushered right out of there.
I've heard he isn't as friendly as David Bowie.
No, the complete opposite, actually. I'm sure he's nice if you got to know him, but at an after show, it's just one of those. It was just one of those things where you just don't. But yeah, when I was young, my only bucket list was, my first concert was seeing Boston. Don't Look Back, 1978. I was 10 years old, maybe 11. My dad took me. It was in Erie. Sammy Hagar, the Red Rocker, was opening, and you go up to that was my very first concert, and we had a small arena, and there's all those American Eagle buses with their goofy, 70s airbrush sides, and I was like, I want to know what's inside that thing, and I want to get in one of those things and ride around and play drums. That's what I wanted to do, and it was like, that was my only bucket list for like a long time, was just to be able to travel in a tour bus and play for people.
You definitely probably got your fill of that, though, right?
I got my fill of that. I will say, though, to this day, I never slept better than in a bunk in a Prevost.
Isn't it weird? It's just the rolling. It's the rolling of the.
It's the little buzz of the generator, and and those things have such good suspensions.
Yeah.
Unless you're on the top. I never got a top bunk. I couldn't sleep on the top, but I'll take bottom or middle.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'd be so hungover, I would just be like, look, just leave my room key on the table. I'm gonna sleep in the bus. And I would just sleep in the parking lot because I was so comfortable. I just didn't want to get up.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you got a nice size bunk where it's not the small ones.
Yeah, if you're not the small ones. Yeah, if you got those.
The big ones where you can sit up.
Big halfway ones. Yeah.
Yeah, those are so nice.
That's living large on tour. If you can get a bus like that.
Well, we didn't get one of those until like the last few years.
Yeah, and Manson, we had those in Manson. It was the only time I ever had them, because he got his own star coach with the full bedroom in the back.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because he would always travel with, at the time, Dita, and then it was Evan and Rachel Wood, in the back, and he brought his cats with him, and he would keep them in the bus.
Really?
Back. But yeah, Lily.
And, cats. I've always wondered about that.
Yeah, got them everywhere. Little carry-alls. We bring them into his hotel room for him and everything. Sure. Yeah. Cats are definitely easier to tour with than dogs. That's for sure. A little more mobile. As long as we were in America. If we left the country, obviously we couldn't take them, but yeah, if we were in America, those cats went everywhere. So we had the good bus for the band because he was already in a star coach. But
so was it an exciting era when you started to see that even the filmmakers like Oliver Stone and David Lynch were wanting to work with you guys and integrate?
Again, another crazy. I'm sure Charlie talked about it too. Doing the all that editing for Natural Born Killers. We had a portable Pro Tools machine, a computer with us, and we'd bring it up into the hotel room. Usually we'd put it in Charlie's room, and then we'd all me and Trent and Charlie would just congregate in his room and just work on editing, because that whole movie was that collage. There was no score at all. It was all licensed. So putting that together was no small task. My biggest memory of that was East Berlin. We were playing in Berlin, but our hotel was in East Berlin. This was 93, I guess it must have been.
Wow.
the wall had been down, but only for a couple of years, and they were just starting to build. So there was like a Sheraton or something. And they put us in this hotel because in the basement was the very first TGI Fridays. Like, and so they were like, and we were going to be there for a few days because it was like, I don't know, there was some break in the tour or whatever it was. And so I just remember, man, we would just go down and eat TGI Fridays, go back to Charlie's room, down to TGI Fridays, back to Charlie's room. Work. And that was my memory of that, was like, I'm in East Berlin eating at a TGI Fridays. The wall's only been down for 4 years, 3 years, whatever it was at that point. And God, it was so weird. And then the David Lynch thing with Perfect Drug. David actually came to New Orleans, and I'm sure Charlie talked about this too. And
he didn't talk about that.
Well, he didn't talk about that. We did a bunch of sound. What's that?
We talked about it, but he didn't talk detail about David Lynch. And David Lynch is like one of my heroes that I've never met. He's kind of my Grail hero that I'd like to meet.
He is so cool and just every bit as weird as you hope he would be, but that cool kind of weird,
Yeah.
And when he came down and we were making those drones and sounds for like the beginning of it, this is before we did Perfect Drug or whatever, but we were like creating all these sounds for him, and he would just sit in New Orleans in the field thing. And I wish I would have kept it, but he would describe every sound visually.
Oh, nice.
And he's like, so this one time here's my David Lynch impression. He pulls out this sheet of paper and he starts drawing on it. He's like, it's got to be a box. It's like a box, and there's snakes, and the snakes and he's drawing these squiggly lines, and it's like the snakes are jumping out of the box, and there's snakes everywhere, and they're hissing, and so there's this picture of this square and all this stuff, and I was like, oh God, I got to take that and put it somewhere safe because it's an actual David Lynch piece art scribble. But that's the way he would talk about like sound and everything, and then. And then we did Perfect Drug and all that. And then I had to fly. We were so behind on the mix of that they put me on a plane from New Orleans to LA with the final DAT mixes in my pocket. And I had to fly the tape to LA and walk it straight into mastering. Like we were the last track to get inserted into the final movie and soundtrack and everything. And David was like, oh man, his people were getting pissed. Because we were weeks behind schedule. And but after that, I actually remained friends with David for a few years. He would do these things on Fridays. That house that he films in at the beginning, the house in Hollywood? He owns that house.
Yeah.
That house is like right next to his other house. And that house was for sale. And so he's like, you know what, if I buy it and I film the whole movie in it, and then I turn it into my editing office, it's a business write-off. So he just bought a whole house and put it on the budget of the movie, and then shot all those scenes in it. But the house right next to it became his. He has a film projection room, like full 35 mil, and it's a recording studio to like do all his own final mixes, audio wise.
Wow.
Are in there. So he would do these wine and current event talks every Friday, and so for quite a while, every Friday I would get invited, and I'd go up and everybody would sit around and drink red wine, talk about the politics of the week,
nice,
current events, things that were happening.
Wow.
As he was building the recording studio, have you ever seen his art?
Yeah.
His crazy art.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
He invites me over to show me progress on his studio one day, and I come up and he's out in his back deck with this got to be 36 by 36 canvas. And on the canvas is a mummified rat, a meatloaf, an actual full meatloaf, and something else. And he's like, hey, and my nickname again, Podboy. Podboy, come over here. Let me see. Like, and he'd be like, Podboy, look at this. I found this rat when we were tearing apart the ceiling in the studio. So I've got a meatloaf rat on, and he's like shellacking it and doing all this crazy stuff. And I just was like,
how classic.
My life is so awesome. Like there's certain times where it's just the greatest day. Like there'd be no way to really, you do a great impression. You can't really explain it half the time. It's just like, it's one of those, like you almost had to be there. And then I lost touch with them. Like you know how we all are in the industry, like you're really tight with somebody, like your orbits intersect for a certain amount of time, and then they just start moving out again and you lose touch with people. and then something brings them back together, and then you reconnect with people, and it's just kind of the way the industry works. It seems like,
We always figure we'll see each other again. I think that's the reason.
and we all know that it's like you're half your life you're probably on the other side of the world right now.
Yeah.
And thank God for social media. We can kind of see, what everyone's up to.
Yeah.
Time to time.
We got a question here from Zach Newland. Shed some light on what the Purest Feeling sessions were like. Was it just you, Trent, and Richard? Or were others involved?
Purest Feeling, man.
Well, first of all, what is that for us that don't know?
It was a song that was for Pretty Hate Machine that never got used. Trent was doing his demos in the basement of a friend of ours' house named Tom Lash in Cleveland. And so Trent was staying with Tom for a little while, and I was driving up from Kent, and Trent had one of those Tascam 4-track cassettes, the Porta Studio, the one with the mixer on it. Remember that one? Still the best one that was ever made.
Yeah, the 244 or the
244. Yeah. Every once in a while, I get a wild hair, and I go on Reverb and see if I can track one of those down.
They're impossible.
They're $1,000 now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think they were that when they were new in the 90s, but all this new indie, lo-fi indie stuff is being done, these 4-track recordings. But anyway, so Trent did the original demos down there. And then the famous story about the studio in Cleveland that was downtown that Trent was working at. We would go in there like late at night and do recording. There was an old Trident board. I think it was an 80C board and an MCI 24-track. And then Trent had his Mac Plus. And back then we were still running Performer. We didn't even switch to Studio Vision yet.
What synths?
What's that?
What synths?
What synths? An Oberheim Expander, the Emulator 2. The Emulator 2. Trent had the HD, so it had the 1 5.25 floppy and the 10 megabyte hard drive, which was the state of the art at that point. And then he got into the Prophet VS. That was his next big one. Those were always Trent's big three. Was the Oberheim and the Prophet VS. The Prophet VS kind of became like one of Trent's most signature sounds.
Really?
Yeah, that was one of his all-time favorites. And then eventually he got a Mini Moog. We had a Mini Moog for Downward Spiral. I'm trying to think what else we had. Oh, he had a 2600 without the keyboard. He just had the module by Downward Spiral. I'm trying to think what else we had synth-wise. A lot of what we did was really sampling. We were sample kings. I had one of my big drum machines was the SP1200.
Right.
And I bought mine with turbo, so I had 6.8 seconds total record time. Wow. And I had to save all the banks on a 5.25 inch. It used the Commodore 64.
Yeah.
Took 5 minutes to write that disc, and it took 3 to 3.5 minutes to load that disc.
Yeah.
So we would start the set with samples that I loaded off a disc. Song 2, I had to play all samples, factory samples, inside, because in the background it was loading the next floppy disk. On more than one occasion, it would be like, we finished the second song and it still was loading that 6-second bank of drum samples. And then I quickly switched over to the S900 because it had the triggers directly in the back.
Yeah.
And the Emax 1 and the Emax 2. But we were kings of samples. So a lot of the Nine Inch Nails stuff, it was samples and creative use of sampling. We used to have to, for live, Emus used to have the internal, you could sample itself internally. So let's say there was a loop or a long sample I'd have to play and its root was C3. You could resample it internally up to C5 so that when you played C5, it would go blah, 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 and that's all it would be. But it would only take up that much memory. And then what you had to do is go to that root key and then just tune the root key down 24 steps to put it back to the original pitch. Now it made it aliasy and grainy, but for live, it worked good enough. And it bought back, your precious RAM. RAM was so precious.
Yeah.
So we were, we would even, and for live, we never took synths out on tour. They're just too valuable and everything. Yeah. So we would sample everything we needed we went from the Emu, we didn't like the Emulator 3 at all. We switched over to a Kai, so it was a Kai S1000s and a Kai S3000s. But then when the Emulator 4 came out, they kind of fixed what was wrong with it. And then we went back to Emulator 4s. And as you can see behind me, I still have an E6400 Ultra with a 100 zip hard drive, and that's a CD-ROM drive, 50-pin Centris SCSI.
Nice.
All of it still works. I still have 3 of those that are in storage, like you know, because if this one ever goes down, I have sample banks in that format that I don't know how to convert to anything. There's just no way to convert them unless I manually play everything and sample everything into a Pro Tool session and then chop it up and then make a contact library. But
you don't want to do that. Get some of your students to do that.
I'm 53, dude. Time is precious.
Yeah.
I got other things I want to do rather than sit here and spend 6 months going through my library doing that.
That's so true, man. Well,
you know exactly what I'm talking about because I know you save everything too. So
get your students to help you with that. Get a project.
You want extra credit? Be the greatest Pro Tools editing assignment ever. Yeah. You know, we used to do something where we would create a MIDI map and just like hold each note of a, you know, like in MIDI, have it trigger the sampler, like, you know, for like 2 bars in case it was, just made sure the MIDI note was long enough and then put 2 bars of silence, you know, so the MIDI, you know, was a big thing, and then just hit play and then record the output of it going up chromatically. That's the easy part. The hard part is then re-chopping it up and looping everything again. It's like, ugh.
I mean, you've given yourself a lot of work assignments. You know, I mean, being in 9 Inch Nails, Marilyn Manson, and Tweaker, kind of like all back to back. I mean, actually, we just had a question from Rene Amador. It says, could you please share a story of recording process of Antichrist Superstar?
Oh, man, yeah. Heck yeah. Well, we had the whole band come to New Orleans, and we rented them houses, you know, like double apartments that they could stay in. That record, it was still, the first half was all the original guitar player, Scott Patesky. And he ended up leaving, separating from the band, you know, halfway through that process. And then Twiggy took over kind of the primary writing of the rest of that record. So it's got kind of both their styles in there. You know, Daisy was Scott. Daisy was a bit more frilly. Twiggy's more straight up, you know, like riffy. So the record had this balance of like the Portrait of American Family record, which was all Patesky. And then, you know, this changeover. I ended up playing drums on a few songs, like Kinderfeld and the Beautiful People, Digga the Dumb Toms is both Ginger and myself, and we set up like trios of toms and we played it together. So you got that multi-player, you know, tight sloppiness, you know, drum line, if you will. And then we just did take after take, you know, with a couple overhead mics, you know, for each of us and built those up layer by layer. We had both studios going. I mean, man, we at one point we had found ourselves in shifts where Twiggy and Trent, I just put them together, Twiggy and Trent, they would work together doing like weird guitar sounds and, you know, all sorts of crazy stuff. And then Manson and I engineered the vocals. So for some reason, Manson and I always got along just amazingly, right from the beginning. And he always felt comfortable doing vocals with me. So, you know, I ended up engineering vocals. So those 2 guys would stay up all night and do all the crazy sound stuff. And then Manson and I would come in like the afternoons, and Manson would track all of his vocals while those guys were sleeping. So we ended up like doing this like kind of shift thing for a while to get the record done. But that record was just one of the craziest times like ever. Like I said earlier, you know, you imagine, you know, it's like you take a night off and you take all of Manson and all of Nails and take them down to Bourbon Street and let them wild.
That's an acting.
It's, whew, man, there were some nights, but again, those were good times.
You guys weren't pretending. You were living the life at the same time.
We really were. Yeah, there was no pretending any of that.
But it shows, and it's like the you know, the music and the things that you guys created were you know, they still have it today. So I think that's kind of like the wax track scene once again. It still lives up all these years later.
Yeah, people still like when it comes to Manson, you know, and I was in that band for 7.5 years, give or take. You know, what got me back in Manson was the Skinny Puppy tour, because people had kind of written me off as a live drummer because I hadn't done anything. I was remixing bands and scoring video games, and I already had one Tweaker record, and I had done 2 Tweaker records by 2004. So, you know, me as like the live drummer thing, it kind of like, I had kind of shifted focus a little bit, and you know how it is in the industry, out of sight, out of mind. You know, it's just people are, you know, they only see that far. But what happened with Manson was they were playing MTV Europe, and they were playing the Personal Jesus single on the Greatest Hits record, and Ginger fell off his riser. The stage was 15 or 20 feet high, and Ginger pulled the Ginger, and he fell backwards, and he fell and he broke his wrist. He broke the eye orbit bone in his eye. He actually was in a coma for a day, and then came out of that fine. But he had a severe concussion. He was he couldn't fly home. He wasn't cleared to fly for almost 3 weeks because of the brain. So because I toured with Tweaker opening for Skinny Puppy, everybody was like, "Oh, Vrenna's playing drums again? Oh, cool." So I got a call from Manson's manager, Tony, who's still his manager, always been his manager, saying, "Hey, man, so you're playing drums again? Well, guess what happened to Ginger?" And they were like, "Look, would you want to come out and fill in? You know, for this, we have a 6-week tour. It leaves in 3 weeks. And Ginger's not going to be able to play for months because of his broken bones and everything else." You know, I was like, "Hell yeah, that sounds fun." And that 6-week tour turned into 7.5 years with that band. So
but you changed to be the keyboard player, though.
I did that tour.
Yeah.
We ended up touring for a year.
Wow.
And Ginger could have come back, but Manson talked to Ginger and said, "Look, dude, you know, we're 6 months into this tour. You know, is it cool if we just let Vrenna finish it out?" Yeah. And Ginger's like, "Yeah, dude, yeah." You know, he's like, "I don't want to switch drummers 6 months in, because you know how each other thinks on stage, and you know, you just get that rhythm going." And so after that ended, I ended up helping put together the band for that band Gnarls Barkley when they were huge, that Crazy single. So I was off with Gnarls Barkley for a year, being their drummer. And I got a call from Tony again saying, "Hey, you know, the band's ready for another tour. Do you want to come back?" And I'm like, "Well, what happened to Ginger?" He's like, "Oh, no, Ginger's back. He's playing drums, but Pogo quit. Pogo and Manson had a huge fight, and now he quit. So Manson wants to know if you want to come back, but move over and play keyboards." And I was like, "Sure. When do you need me?" He's like, "Oh, we're already in rehearsal." He's like, "Where are you?" And I, believe it or not, I was in Perth. And he's like, "You're in Perth?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's the last show for Gnarls. We were on that Gnarls Barkley. We toured exactly 1 full calendar year." Wow. That song "Crazy" was #1 in 40 different countries. It was unbelievable what happened with CeeLo Green and Danger Mouse. I mean, that was like, I've never seen anything like that, like on that pop level.
Really?
So Tony's like, "Well, call me when you get home from Perth." I'm like, "Well, it's the last show, 24-hour flight. I'll call you when I land." I landed, took a 2-hour nap, and started rehearsal with Manson, and we left a month later for another year. So I probably, from 2004, because of the Tweaker tour, I ended up being on tour from then till about 2011, almost
crazy,
completely solid the whole time.
It's no wonder that you had to wind up taking a break. I mean, yeah. I get crazy after 3 weeks on the tour. I can't imagine you're touring for a year.
The problem with tour is you just have too much free time.
Yeah.
And you're waiting around for sound check, or you're waiting around to go on stage. And if you don't have that's where the substance thing can come in. And every night is a party because you're in town. So there's always an after party or some club, or, there's something or you just stay at the venue and party, whatever it is. It's like, you're the reason everyone's out. So, it's just night after night after night. It's like, well, I can get as messed up as I want, because I don't need to be workable until 5 p.m. sound check tomorrow. Whatever. And that leads to a lot of problems.
I bet, yeah. Something I'm really interested in, that I was actually been anxious to talk to you about this whole interview, is in 2001 on your Attraction to All Things Uncertain Tweaker album, you work with David Sylvian.
Yeah.
on Linoleum.
Yeah.
I mean, I gotta say, I'm like a huge Japan fan. So I gotta start by saying that that's another experience where I was kind of like thinking, wow, what's the story on that?
He is one of my all-time vocal heroes. He is, man, that voice. I was such a Japan freak. That keyboard player I told you about in my high school band, John Trevethan, that introduced me to Trent, also introduced me to the band Japan. And the first record I ever heard was Oil on Canvas. And immediately just was like, wow. And then just dove in head first, on that band. And then followed his solo career, Dead Bees, Bees on a Cake. What was the other one? I mean, he just, anyway, the whole time. But
Beehive.
Oh, yeah, some Beehive. Yeah, that was the other one. And wasn't there, what was the first solo record? Gone to Earth. That was one. And just, anyway, all of it. So just always was a lifelong fan going back to high school. And so when I was doing the first record, the Tweaker records, I don't sing. So the idea is, music and then get guest vocals and try to create, like a concept album, putting cool guest vocals from cool different genres together, Shudder to Think and David Sylvian and Robert Smith and Will Oldham and, just weird people that I love their writing and their voice. So
really
Dave, what's that?
Really nice eclectic group of people.
Yeah, just awesome. So my manager at the time, Jeff, it was like, well, who would you want to, if you could have anybody, and I was, and this was, 1999, 2000. I'm like, oh, number one, David Sylvian. All right, let me see what I can do. And just reached out and we sent him a few songs. And for Linoleum, I mean, I had about 6 tracks that were, almost 100%, and they were arranged in song structure and everything. And I was like, please pick that one. Please pick, like I was going to let him take his choice of whatever he wanted to sing on. And he chose the one I was hoping he picked because I just heard his voice on that song right from day one. And he just said, okay. And we worked out a deal. But here's the funny thing. I never talked to him on the phone. Never. And again, this is like, 2000. So not really a lot of internet yet. Emails are not common. We hand wrote letters and faxed them to each other on an actual fax machine back and forth. He has lived his life as about as far off the grid as you could get.
Yeah.
At that time, I think he was in Vermont, of all places. Yeah. And like in the woods, like just gone, Yeah. But he would fax me letters and like he would fax me like here's the lyrics, here's what I want, blah, 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 and they were handwritten on a piece of paper that he like, and so I would have to fax them back. And and also back then we didn't have this type of internet again. So I printed a mix and I also sent them like the multi-track stems of stuff. And I, had to mail him a CD-ROM, data CD of may have been a DVD-R. No, it's probably just a CD-R. Sent that to him with a tempo and he could record into any DAW that he wanted or whatever. And then they had to mail me back a CD with the vocals in it, I could import. I mean, back then we had to mail everything back and forth to be able to collaborate like that. You couldn't do it with WeTransfer. So he sent me the tracks. Of course, I immediately started crying the minute I pressed play because it was just gorgeous.
It does that, doesn't it? Yeah.
It is just so cool. And I just couldn't believe, it was one of those things where you're like, I bet halfway through this, he goes, I got better things to do. And he doesn't finish the track or, he gets, but man, the day that arrived in the mail, I was shaking. I just couldn't even believe it. And, called everybody I could call, immediately faxed them a letter, just gushing about it and how much I loved it. And then I wanted to tour for that record. What I did was my tour idea, which has now been done 1,000 times, but it would have been really cool in 2000, 2001 was I had asked everybody who sang if they wouldn't mind setting up their little, mini DV or VHS camcorder, whatever you had, and just do the, Nothing Compares to You, Sinead O'Connor close up and just sing your song. You can just hit play. It doesn't have to be in sync. I'll hear it on the tracks that you're just kind of singing along. And I was going to build a mannequin with a television head And then every time there was a guest vocal, the guest vocal would have been pre-recorded with a click track coming to me, and their face would have appeared on the face of the mannequin. That was my big idea. So David did that. So somewhere in my storage, I've got a little mini DV of David's face singing Linoleum and everything. It's totally bizarre. But again, never talked to him. Second record comes around, and of course, I'm like, let's ask David again. And David was totally up for it again. He had moved somewhere else. Maybe the first time he was in England still. The second time he was in Vermont, but he was in the States. And so I sent him another bunch of tracks, and he picked Pure Genius, which I love because it's in 5/4, and it's just really a bizarre 5/4 field with the jazz drums in 5 and the whole thing. And I was like, yeah, I picked another favorite one of mine.
Yeah.
He did that track, sent it back. It was every bit as cool. By this time now, it was all email and everything. He was even more off the grid this time than before. It was like I had to send him the label had to send him paperwork for like the publishing splits, and we need you to sign this agreement that like you would, a sideman agreement to be on any album release.
Yeah.
He didn't want to give his address. He didn't want to give his home address to the label to send them all the paperwork. So it was almost like the label almost wasn't going to let me use the track because they're like, he won't tell us where he lives. We can't get anything signed, and we can't put it out if there's not, a release form that he's okay with being on the record. And, we paid him a fee plus the publishing split and the whole thing. And but he just refused to give up his address. It was really fun. Finally, he did. And then I only met him one time, and I met him when he was on tour. He toured about a couple years after that. I think I was still in LA, and he did a tour. Yeah, because he played the Wiltern, and I think it was the Wiltern, but he was playing one of those small theaters in LA. And so I got on the guest list and whatever, and he actually performed a version of Linoleum with his band.
Oh, wow.
And, Jansen's his brother. So, Jansen was playing drums. I think they may have sampled a little boing, boing, boing at the beginning and just made a little loop out of that, and then just played live, improvised everything over the top. I don't remember who was all in his band at that point. I don't think Mick Karn was playing bass, but I know Jansen was there for sure.
I think Barberi was still in it.
Was Barberi still in it?
Yeah.
So so I was just excited to see the band, but then afterwards I got to meet him, and and that was the one time we talked for a little bit after a show in his dressing room and everything. And nice as can be, very soft spoken, Sylvian, like, just another idol. It's like it's weird to me that not more people know Japan.
No, I know it is weird. But of the people that do, they really love them or they really hate them.
It's one of those. It's definitely one of those for. Yeah, you're not just a casual listener of Japan. You either get it or you just don't.
Like back in the punk days, I was listening to Obscure Alternatives in '79, and my punk friends used to be like, "Turn this shit off." And so you kind of had to take a bit of flack with it.
Oh man, when they, like I said, I got into them later. Gentlemen Take Polaroids. What's the one where he's on the front cover and it's
Quiet Life.
Quiet Life.
Yeah.
The later stuff with the Asian influences and everything. And then when I started going backwards to the glam punk early, even I was like, what the hell? Like, man, they took it. They just one day said, nope. And they changed, man. That early glam stuff's crazy sounding.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting. It was weird as that they have that fantastic history in Tokyo, where really their career was carved out of the country, Japan, and it wasn't really purposeful. They kind of named the band and then somehow became popular there, and then really the culture latched onto them. So it was kind of neat to see how they transitioned with all that, because at the beginning it was kind of self-admitted just for the magazines. Really, their image was really the most important thing, as opposed to the music.
Well, I'm a huge Duran Duran fan as well. And Nick Rhodes is my favorite member of Duran Duran, always has been. I just love his keyboard style. I love his sounds. I love his look, because he looked exactly like David Sylvian. And then you read interviews and he's like, oh yeah, I just stole all this from David Sylvian.
Oh, he did. I mean, as a matter of fact, he told me that in person. We toured with Duran Duran with the band we were in before, Images in Love. We did 3 shows. But before that, we hung out with them once when they did a show in Vancouver, right at the beginning when they were like that, the first record.
Oh,
and
man.
so I sat with them, and that all we talked about was Japan and Steve Jansen, and then also YMO, Yukihiro Takahashi.
Yeah.
That's all we talked about. And
God,
they
I
said,
can't believe you toured with those. Like, man, that's Planet Earth, Girls on Film.
yeah,
That's one of their best
really,
records.
they just sort of like took their inspiration and then, bent it a little bit, and they were more accessible. And I guess they kind of like, struck a chord. It became like the new Beatles.
Man, did they ever. And when they broke apart for that little time and did their solo records, I wasn't really the Power Station guy. I was the song was called Election Day. And it was the other side project that they did. 3 of the guys went and did Power Station, and the other 2 guys did.
Come on.
Oh, what is it?
Stop.
What was it?
I can't remember.
You know what I'm talking about, though? And that record was very Japan-y to me. It was very synth-heavy, obviously.
I'm surprised no one has checked in with that answer.
Oh, and that was, it was Simon and Nick did the other band. Oh, my God, I got to look it up or I'm going to go insane. It's when you get those things caught in your head and you can't get rid of it.
So also we should say that, on your 2 a.m. Wake Up Call album in 2004, you also have Robert Smith.
I do.
Just casually. You got Robert Smith, David Sylvia.
Before I get to Robert, Arcadia.
Yeah.
That was a side project.
Arcadia, right.
Arcadia. Yeah, I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Yes, I did. That was another one of those. Well, I got David back, and I was like, well, what's another hero? Robert Smith? Okay, let's reach out to him. And oddly enough, at that point, Robert was agreeing to do a couple of odd one-offs. He did something with one of the Blink 182 guys at one point, and he sang on someone else's track. It's like I was like the 3rd weird collaboration that he all did within this like 6-month span, because the band wasn't really doing anything, and he was just looking for interesting creative outlets. And he said, yeah, and I crapped my pants. I couldn't even believe it.
I can't
and he, track's awesome, and just it was more of an upbeat, poppier track on the Tweaker record, and it reminded me a little bit of like the Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me era Robert Smith a little bit vocally, which is one of my favorite records, Cure records, and then And again, we just did the whole thing where I would just have to mail, and I don't remember if I was uploading, downloading at this point. I don't remember if internet was fast enough yet by 2004, but he did it. And then the following year, The Cure was headlining the good old K-Rock 80s new wave weenie roast thing that they used to do out in the Blockbuster Pavilion in Sanborn, Indiana. If you remember that colossal, ugly, hot as heck. Ugh, what an awful amphitheater that place was. But they were headlining it that year. And so I went back. This was after the record and everything, but got to meet him then, got to hang out with him backstage. Eventually I got to meet everybody, even if I couldn't meet him while we were doing the track. And again, super nice, very eccentric, but completely just down to earth and humble. He's like a really cool dude. I'm amazed at how many of these older hero people are just actual, like how nice they just truly are and how humble they truly are and normal, I had that same experience. And then some of the younger bands I work with, they get signed, they get a big record deal, and they come out like the biggest jerks in the world. Like,
right, yeah,
we're the coolest thing ever. And you haven't proven yourself yet, What
was that like when you, the first time you ever heard Johnny Cash's version of Hurt?
I thought then, and I still think now, that it just blows the original Nine Inch Nails one out of the water.
It's not that it blows it out. It's just that it is monumentally, fantastically.
It's the best cover I've ever heard of anything, practically. Knowing where he was and knowing how close to death he was when he was recording that last album. there's just something about his performance of it that just, every single time, it just melts me.
It's another epic thing that can't be done again, just like your Bowie stuff.
I only have one issue with it. And I don't know if Trent has the issue because we've never talked about it. He changed one word in the lyrics.
Did he really?
Yep. There's a lyric in the second verse that says, I wear this crown of shit upon my, and Johnny changed it to, I wear this crown of thorns. He didn't want to cuss. But there was always something about that crown, the line, a crown of shit is just one of the most, it's one of my favorite lines in the song. So the fact that he changed it, I get it, but at the same time, I'm like, I wish I could have heard him say shit.
Yeah.
I hope we're allowed to cuss on here. So I didn't even ask.
Yeah.
But that's the only, but I mean, when I hear it, it's just, man, it's just so, you know, it's almost become Johnny's song at this point, you know. More of my younger students, probably because of where I live now that I'm in the South, and I'm only 80 miles south of Nashville. Like I can get to Nashville in about 75 minutes, give or take, you know, 90 minutes, depending on what part of town. That people down, like my students know the Johnny Cash version and not the Nine Inch Nails version. Like a lot of people didn't even realize it was a cover, you know, but you know, I'm living near the, you know, country capital of the world. So, but again, I think after his cover came out, he just kind of, that became his song forever.
I think you know, it's absolutely monumentalized, as I was saying. I mean, after working with all these different people and different artists and stuff like that, which artist do you think has left other than Flood, of course, which artist has left the greatest impression upon you?
Wow. David Bowie had a lot, you know, seeing how he worked, getting to know him and his whole band, and seeing how their musicianship, like one thing about David, every band he's had throughout his career has been like he and Zappa, you know, if you were in David Bowie's band or Zappa's band, you knew you were the best on the planet because his bands were awesome.
Yeah.
So getting to know all those musicians every day, and it really made you just want to be a better musician. And like, you know, it's like, you know, I felt like every night I had to keep up with Zach Alford, you know, because the kid's just amazing. One of the other bands that we didn't even talk about, but it was U2. I did this remix for U2 for the Tomb Raider movie. It was supposed to be a new version of a song it was called Elevation. It was on the album All That You Left Behind or whatever it is. It was their first Interscope record, and it was going to be the title track. So they sent out for remixes, and I did this remix. My partner Clint and I Clint Walsh, we turned it into like a more heavy kind of rock thing. Like if they were going to play this live and kind of beef it up for the live, because the album version's pretty light, how would they do it? So we didn't go all crazy with it, but we just new riffs, heavier tones, more slamming drums, the whole thing. I get a call from Interscope saying, okay, well, the band chose your remix. I'm like, what do you mean the band chose my remix? It's a remix. You either use it on a B-side or you don't. I don't know, you know. Like, secretly, that was an audition. They paid all these people to do remixes just to hear what people would do for the song, so the band could pick the producer that they wanted to then go into the studio with for 2 days and redo the song with that person. So I won a secret contest I didn't even know I was in.
Wow.
So the band's in LA. We were at Enterprise back when Enterprise Studios was still there in Burbank. Great studio. We were in that room across the street with the 108 input SSL, the massive tracking room that could do orchestral tracking, and their whole road crew. U2 keeps a backline of all their equipment in LA. They keep one in Europe, one in LA, and I think one in Tokyo somewhere, or somewhere in Japan. So that way, if they have to fly to different continents, they don't have to ship backline, which is ungodly expensive, as you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so coming into the studio, their backline, all their techs are there. I've got the Edge's full live rig set up in the live room. I've got Larry's drums over here, Adam's bass over here. So anyway, the three guys come in the first day. Bono didn't, but the Edge kind of runs the studio. Like he's in charge. And so he's out there like playing tones, and he's like, what do you think, Chris? Is this heavy enough? Like, is this like, will this work? Like, what do you think? And I'm like, I'm shaking on the talkback button. Like, you're the effing Edge, dude. Like, because I've seen every tour since Unforgettable Fire through you know, just a few years ago. Like, you know, like I've seen I've probably seen them in Depeche Mode more than any other band live in my life. So we recut the whole thing. They wanted to play the parts themselves, not, you know, so we recut everything with them. The second day, I'm mixing with my mix engineer, Paul. And then the band comes in, including Bono. It comes in at the end. And, you know, I had cut Bono's thing and did a call and answer like vamp for the outro of the thing. And so Bono comes up and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he's pointing at the Pro Tools screen. He's like, so the blue one is the ooh, ooh. This one is elevation. The red one is, what part's the red one again? He's like, could you go instead of blue, yellow, red, like you built? Could you go blue, blue, yellow, blue, red, blue? And I'm again, fingers on the mouse, Bono's hands on my shoulder. And I'm like literally shaking. Like I'm like unbelievable. And then they all approved the mix and they left and I ran a bunch of masters and then me and Paul just sat there and ordered out a pizza and like a 12 just had to like, I have like, and again, you know what's crazy? 4 of the nicest people I've ever met.
That's like, it couldn't have worked if it was any different. You don't think.
I mean, it's just, and then I ran into me and Larry became friends, and I ran into Larry at a few shows in New York because Larry moved to New York for a while. And so we'd run into each other at shows in New York from time to time. And so we'd catch up and stuff like that. But that was another one of those bucket list things where you're like if anybody was allowed to be any way they wanted to be and it would be fine, would be you two. They could have been the biggest a-holes. They could be needy and mean and like, you know, and they would have earned every right to do that because they're freaking you two. And they just weren't. They were super cool. So I guess to finally answer your question, everybody I've ever worked with has taught me something. And sometimes it's not always a good thing. You know, sometimes you work with somebody and it doesn't really go that well. And then that teaches you a lesson as well. Like, I don't want to do something like that person did. Or, you know, I accidentally pissed off one of my guest singers on the second record to the point where he immediately disavowed me and would never talk to me again after the second Tweaker record, which was a shame because I love the guy. But I edited some of the vocal performance he did. And he thought by me editing his vocals, you know, that was his part of the song. Like I shouldn't have touched it at all.
Yeah.
And never talked to me again.
Wow.
18 years. He's never like, I haven't really reached out to him, but the email he sent me and the manager was one of the worst emails I've ever had to read. But it taught me a lesson that maybe I need to say, is it okay if I don't use these 2 lines? Because you're kind of wordy in the chorus and all I wanted to do was space it out a bit.
Yeah.
You know, to let the vocal float a bit more, you know? So sometimes you just got to make mistakes and learn the hard way. Yeah.
And, you know, what better way than to make a suggestion that somebody could listen to and say, well, I don't like what you did, so put it back.
Okay, and I would have put it. I would have rather put it back and not have And I know the song is better because of what I did, but I would have rather left it and left our friendship intact.
Yeah. But, you know, I hate these old grudges that have happened. I mean, I have those too. And I wish one around.
Anybody in this industry at all has grudges against you and that you may have against other people for things, the way certain things may have worked out. And now that we're older, you know,
I don't have grudges anymore.
No time for it anymore. Like, you know,
I don't have grudges. I just know that there are some people that have grudges against me.
Yeah. So, and, you know, Trent and I went through our period and we patched things up years ago. And, you know, like after I quit Manson, so it must have been about 2011, we talked for the first time. We started going to breakfast and I'd go up to his house and I met his kids and, you know, and then we lost touch because I left LA and now we've all reconnected and, you know, it's just, it's just, it's hard, you know, bands are hard because it's emotionally like a marriage. You've got that emotional tie, like you're actually married, but then you've got that cutthroat business side of it too, where it's, you know, whether one person gets more than another person or whether everybody's splitting everything right down the middle or 3 ways or 4 ways,
That's how I like it. I like everybody to get the same, so that doesn't create like some weird.
Well, exactly.
Weird
Except in situations where one of those people doesn't carry their own weight and isn't earning their full third, and then you're like, dude, I'm doing 75% of the work, but we're splitting everything 33 and a third, and all you do is show up late to rehearsal high, and you can't remember your parts.
Yeah, that's when a conversation is
and then they're like, oh yeah. So, you know, but yeah, I'm too old to deal with that stuff anymore. I just want to live the rest of my life happy. And, you know, I did lose a couple friends over the alcohol thing that, you know, that when I got so bad, you know, after Manson, that I pissed off a couple people that, you know.
You're a professor now. Come on, let's just call you Professor Vrenna.
You can call me Professor.
Professor now. You're a long way.
It is, you know, and sobriety is not, you know, we've had too many friends that have passed, you know, because of stuff. So don't even need to get into that.
One thing I haven't really talked about yet and haven't touched on is your video game world.
Yeah, that was that's still another thing. The one thing being a teacher, you know, because I work, you know, I work a college professor lifestyle now. You know, I teach a few classes and I have office hours and stuff. It's not the most demanding hourly job, but it's, like I was saying at the beginning, it's really fulfilling. I'll get to the game in a second. Much like, you know, like Flood would stop and do, like, show me everything he's doing. Like, I would do that. Like, every person I ever worked with, I tried to, like, ask them what they're doing, or I'd watch them. I try to learn, try to, you know, soak up as much knowledge as I could. So once I started teaching and I started getting my life together, it almost became this calling of, like, now I'm the old dude.
Right.
You know, Nationals, I was 21 when we hit with Pretty Hate Machine. So, like, I feel like now that I'm in my 50s, I want to see other 21-year-olds do something successful for them. And if I can be one of those steps in their life of learning and maybe help the next singer or next great player or next whatever they want to be, I almost feel like it's not just a job anymore. It's become like this weird calling, that, like, an obligation, because I got so much good shit for 35 years. I feel like I'm obligated now to give some of it to the young people, because with the internet and everything, the way it is, you know, it's like, it's really hard out there. So, you know, so anyway, enough about that.
One of your students is inevitably going to come to you one day and show you his achievement that you will realize, oh my God, that started from something that, you know, you unleashed here.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so that's my dream, is to have that happen. But anyway, back to the games. So the video game thing started with me and Trent played Doom 2 and Wolfenstein while we were making Downward Spiral. We actually lost about there's a story. We lost almost a month of work playing Wolfenstein Spear of Destiny on the PC, because every morning we'd get up and, like, we'd be like, all right, let's just play the next level, see where, like, because we'd have to pry ourselves off, and we'd start playing the levels, and then you look up and the sun's starting to set, and we're like, oh, crap, okay, let's just finish this boss, and then tomorrow we won't play this game at all. We'll get back to work. And then the next morning's like, should we just play one level to see what the next world's going to look like? You know, 8 hours later. So we were huge fans of id and all that. And so they approached, you know, Trent about doing the first Quake game, which was in 95, I think it was. We did it in New Orleans, so it was done in 95, 96. And I ended up remaining friends with American McGee, who was our contact person from id Software. He was the one who flew from Texas to New Orleans to work with us on that, and he and I remained friends. And then in 2000, he was doing his game, American McGee's Alice, which was that dark kind of gothic, cool. Now it's like the legendary version of Alice in Wonderland. And so when I scored that in 2000, that became, you know, today that's still probably more than Tweaker. I'm more known for the Alice score than anything else I've ever done as a solo musician.
Had a few questions about it from people here.
Yeah, I mean, every Halloween it pops up on playlists, and, you know, I sell a few copies, you know, online, and it was weird. It's just, and that's 20 years ago now.
How does the approach to something like that differ from your approach to writing music with bands? Or remixes.
Writing video games is probably the hardest type of medium to write for, because a song you can just map it out. You've got your verse, chorus, and done. Scoring a movie, the picture's locked. Here's your start, here's your explosion, here's the character dying. Write your music to fit end. And you have help with the directors, doing spotting sessions for all that kind of work. But for video games, you and I are probably at very different skill levels when it comes to playing games. I am the world's worst video game player.
No, I'm probably the worst because I don't play them.
I don't play them either. I just, I got a Switch, during quarantine. I got the handheld Switch. Yeah. I bought like 3 games for it. I never even took the saran wrap off.
Yeah, for that.
I've been so busy. But so the thing with game music is, you have to be like underscored enough that it doesn't interfere with the action of the game. If your music draws too much attention, it's bad, because they need to listen to, like, if you're playing Call of Duty, you need to listen to like the people you're playing with,
right.
Or if you're hearing gunshots coming from behind you in the headphones, you got to know to turn around. So you can't trot all over the sound effects. And because of the space on each level when it loads, you only get so many megabytes per level. So you can only write 1 or 2 minutes, and that 1 or 2 minutes has to loop endlessly. So if you're on a level for 15 minutes trying to kill zombies, that ambient piece of music has to loop. And that loop has to be it has to be cool enough that people want to hear it, but it can't be so cool that it draws your attention away. And when it loops, if you can hear the loop go around, you have failed. So yeah. Imagine making a fully composed piece of music where the very first hit and the very last, like every automation, if this thing didn't play at the beginning, this thing can't play at the end. If this is at -20 and then it rides and does all this stuff, I got to make sure it ends at -20. So when it loops, you don't hear a volume jump. Then on top of that, add different levels. So you have like basic level, more action, mega action. So you write the whole thing, and then you mute out this block of mega action, and then mute out the middle block. So let's say your loop's playing, and then you kill so many zombies, opens up another door, a new horde comes in, boom, untrigger the middle action. So it has to be able to jump between these levels, all while looping perfectly at the loudest. Let's say the mega action is like, big tribal drums and guitar riffs and everything. And then you kill so many zombies, that mutes out and goes back to the middle, and it's jumping between these parts coming in and out. So everything has to work together, whether it's an ambient track or a fully composed piece. That makes it, those are just some of the rules that you have to do with games. So you can't use MP3, because MP3, puts that little header at the beginning. You can't loop an MP3 because it'll hiccup at the beginning, because it puts that so many samples or millisecond of the metadata. So you have to use OGG or waves or something that, when I did Call of Duty a few years ago, I did a zombie version of Call of Duty in like 2017 or 2015 or 16.
2015, Advanced Warfare.
Okay. I know it's been a while. All my files had to be 24-bit 96 kilohertz. So anybody that knows anything about audio fidelity out there, that's as good as it gets. Yeah. And I was like, wait, the Xbox is streaming 2496 audio files? He's like, oh yeah, in surround sound. And I was like, wow. That's come a long way from, from where I started.
Did you have to update your studio to
What's that?
Did you have to update your studio?
No, not really. I update as I go, but I'm pretty, like, everything I need to do, I can do in here. Yeah. The only thing I can't do in my studio is a 5.1 mix. And I actually just got my first feature film scoring gig last weekend, I think it was. It's a indie horror movie called Dark Entities. The whole thing was shot in the Huntsville area in one of those big old federal style homes with the giant columns. They look scary anyway. So it's like a possession, haunted, Conjuring meets Exorcist, whatever. So I just got the scoring gig for that. So I don't know if I'm going to be required to do 5.1 mixes. If so, then I'll have to buy some more speakers to do. Have you ever mixed in 5.1?
No, I'm still.
I mean, everything I've done for games, they only want stereo. You know, 'cause they really only, you know, and everything I've ever done for film or TV, the small stuff I've done, like She's All That or Rollerball reboot that was, you know, not very successful, but all they've ever wanted is like breakout stems by instrument, you know, all my drums, all my guitars, all this, only in stereo. And then the rear channels are still pretty much reserved for reverbs, flyby spaceships and gunshots and stuff like that. You know, they don't usually put a lot of the music back there. So I've never had to give a 5/1 stem before. So maybe that'll be my next thing I'll have to learn is 5/1 mixing.
Cobwebs and Calderans asks, is there going to be a physical release for Quake champions like Alice?
Very much doubtful. They have gone through a lot of big changes since Quake Champions. I just read the other day that the company that owns id, I think id is owned by Bethesda, who is owned by ZeniMax is the name of the company, is the giant company. They just got bought by Microsoft 2 weeks ago. So now Microsoft owns everything that's under ZeniMax, which is Bethesda, id, and everything else. With so many changes, like it's been bought and sold 3 or 4 times in the last few years. So I would highly doubt it, which is kind of a bummer because we talked about doing that because Quake Champions had 4 main worlds. So there was 4 main themes all done like that. So what I was going to do is I was going to put a larger, like take the quiet, middle, and mega and, you know, make one 5-minute version, you know, that would incorporate all 3, like an actual proper soundtrack thing. And then we were going to do some B-sides and we were going to do a cool little release of it, but business, you know. So I just hope if id's watching, I know you got another game coming up. Hit me up. If you're in Seattle now, I don't know where. I know they're still in Dallas, but yeah, now they're owned by Microsoft. So
is that really the rule of scoring for games? Is really like working with that theory of okay, the layers, and working within that concept, and then not drive yourself crazy and try to figure out anything outside of that.
Yeah, because it's the music has to be interactive like the game itself.
Yeah.
You know, you may take 5 minutes you may take a minute to clear out a room full of zombies. I may take 5 minutes. But either way, once we cross the threshold of an archway to go to the next room or the next hall, then that music has to stop and go back to something else. So it's like triggered off of pixel points within the game map. Like when it triggers, certain actions have to trigger it. And since no 2 people have the same gameplay experience, the music can't be rigid like film because, you know, film is totally edited, you know. The only thing in games that is edited that way are cutscenes. So if your game has a cutscene, you know, that where it stops and goes to like a little 2-minute of dialogue, you know, where you're not playing, you're just watching, those are totally scored like normal. But I like that challenging games. It makes it really hard.
I can only imagine. I mean, even Charlie Clouser was saying, just when we had him a couple of weeks ago, was saying that was the hardest thing for him.
Yeah.
Think about games.
Games is hard. Did he just do the new Saw movie, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's been doing those since Saw 1. I mean, that's been an amazing franchise for him. It's fantastic.
Incredible. Hey, come down.
I love Charlie. Charlie's a good dude.
but you've also scored as well. You've got the Shaolin Showdown.
Yeah, I've done a few things here and there. I've never done a full feature. That's why, you know, my bucket list. You know, we talked about all the bucket list things that, you know, I don't want to say I've run out of bucket list things because you can always come up with something that you've never done.
Sure.
But I will say, you know, man, it gets harder and harder the older I get to think of like, well, now what, you know? But scoring, I'll be honest, I am a television junkie. I have a DVR with 6 channels. I still pay for cable. I subscribe to every streaming service that exists. I'm always taping something. As a matter of fact, just reminded me in exactly 90 minutes or so, the Walking Dead finale that got postponed,
final.
episode 16 because of COVID with the Whisperers, the battle with the Whisperers is tonight. It finally gets aired tonight, the finale that should have aired in February. But anywho, so I guess like one of the things that I would love to do is score either movies or, for me, episodic television. Like give me a Netflix series, you know, something horror, something sci-fi. I would eat that up in a minute. The other thing is being a teacher, since I do work, you know, I get my summers off, which is cool. I can teach summer school if I want to. But you know, it's 9 months, you know, typical traditional teaching. I can't really tour, obviously. If I was offered a tour, I can't really just say, hey, I'm going to go on tour for, you know, 8 weeks right in the middle of fall semester. So the touring part of the career is more over than anything else, but I still have my studio behind me. And so still doing extra work is not only something I like to do, but I will always do. Like on my computer right now over there is a Pig remix I'm doing for Raymond Watts right now. Raymond hits me up every Pig record to do a remix for the remix album. So his new record's coming out, God is Pain, I think it's called. It's coming out next month or something. So nice. I'm a remix for him. And then I have this film set up, and then I mixed a French rock band called Porn from Lyon. I mixed them all through quarantine. I was mixing their record. So as long as I don't have to travel and miss school, you know, I can still take as many gigs as I like, you know, or that I can feel comfortable fitting in.
So people are coming to class in a safe way, masks, or how are you keeping that?
For school, I have a computer lab with 15 workstations that have Pro Tools and Ableton, and you know, they all have a little 2-octave keyboard, and they still have an old M box, the last M box. I'm gonna have to upgrade those eventually to Focusrites or something, just, you know, an audio interface so we can work. But because of COVID, I can only have 8 people in any of my classes. So I have desk, empty desk, desk, empty desk. Everybody has to wear a mask. I go in early and I Listerine, Lysol wipe or Clorox wipe every keyboard, mouse, and tabletop. The whole building gets sprayed down every night. And if we're in the recording studio where, you know, I can't really hand them a $1,000, you know, KM184 microphone, we all wear latex gloves in the studio. So when we're touching gear, because, you know, knobs and stuff, I don't want to wipe down knobs and potentially get something caustic inside on the circuits, you know. So yeah, so we wear gloves in the recording studio. It's been a freaking nightmare, I'm not gonna lie. It's been really hard, but we've been really good, knock on wood. We've been lucky. Nobody's they would have preferred for the fall that we all did online, but I petitioned to have mine in person. Most of my students told me, if I can't come to class in person, I'm not going to register this fall. I'm going to take a semester off.
Right.
In their mind, if they're spending the tuition to come, they want to be in the recording studios. They want to be able to play with the microphones. They want to have access to the computers with Pro Tools. You know, they want all that. That's part of what they're paying for. They're like, sitting at home watching you on Zoom is not, you know, nobody wants to watch Chris Vrenna on Zoom for a class for a whole semester.
You could do a master class.
I actually did one down in Tuscaloosa at the University of Alabama last year. They invited me down for 2 days and I did a master class. That was cool. That was really fun. I like master classes. You should get into teaching. You're the best programmer I have literally ever seen in my life, man.
Who invites me? Hey, hit me up wherever you are.
I totally will. Yeah.
Watch it get hit up.
Beautiful Huntsville, Alabama.
Funny, this guy, I got this call today, is like talking about a film in Portugal and stuff like that, and all of a sudden I realized at the end they want me to be an actor, not the scorer.
Oh, really? You were thinking it was going to be a scoring game?
No, we want you to play the bartender. Like, what?
That's cool. You should do it.
Yeah.
Get yourself a SAG card, man.
Yeah. So lastly here, before we leave you today, I see you've got your studio behind you there. What's that, a Matrix brew?
Yes. Let's see. Let's go. Top is my JP 8000 Roland from the 90s.
Classic.
I love that thing. Yeah. I know it's virtual analog. Like, I got rid of the Nord 2 finally, like last year. I listened to it and I'm like, I don't know. So I finally got rid of that. But Super Saw and the feedback oscillator on that thing.
Yeah.
Under that is the Prophet 6.
Nice.
The sequential. Under that is a Matrix Brute. Under that is my newest little pickup. It's a Korg. What is that new thing? The Wave State.
Oh, those are great.
And then on the wall behind the laptop, I have a Matriarch. I had the Grandmother, but I thought it was a little, and then it came out with the Matriarch. And Sweetwater had everything on sale. Moogs never go on sales. And about 6 months ago during the quarantine, it was like they were putting everything on sale. And it was like, oh, I got to get one of those. So I got that. Awesome. 4 oscillator paraphonic. But
Nice.
you stack those 4 oscillators, and it's got that stereo analog delay like the Mooger Fugger. The Matriarch is probably my favorite Moog. On top of that is the new ASM Hydrasynth.
Oh, right, yeah.
That thing is off for $1,200.
Yeah.
Everybody should own one. It is the coolest sounding modern. Like, we're not trying to be a retro Moog, or, you know, like, I love what Behringer's doing. Don't get me wrong, but we're not trying to do that. Right. We're totally off the wall, new synthesis and stuff. And then behind me, I have, speaking of Moogs, I have a Sub 37, and I have a Blofeld behind me.
Those sound great.
Behind the chair, the white one is the Blofeld, and above that I have an Arturia, the little Micro Freak. I've been doing this thing where I like tiny, inexpensive synthesizers, like the Micro Freak, like the SEO2. Like, I love studio electronics. That SEO2 is thick.
Yeah,
I mean, an SEO1 is still going to run you, you know, $3,800. I bought a Manther. Paul Barker's company makes a tabletop called the Manther. I got one of those. That thing is cool.
Those are great, yeah.
So I've been doing this like weird little kind of things. And then my most recent, because I got so bored, is I bought myself a Alesis drum set. Because I kind of miss playing, and I'm working on some new music for myself right now. And I wanted to be able to just sit down and play, you know, and maybe put up wacky banks of sounds and write. I think differently as a drummer. I know you do too. You know, when you play with your fingers on a keyboard versus sticks on pads, your brain shifts and you just end up writing beats differently somehow. So I wanted to get back to that. Plus, with my shoulder, I mean, I can't really. I've had it repaired twice. I've ripped it out. It's ripped out twice on me. Same shoulder. This shoulder, if it rains, it hurts. You know, I'm like one of those old dudes now. So that's all the synths in here. And then, like I said, it's at school. I keep all the Roland boutiques for teaching, but I am working on some solo music because for grad school, you have to do 2 things. One, you have to write a thesis paper, but the thesis paper is about a capstone project. So you have to do an actual hands-on, some sort of capstone type project. So for me, I'm using it to write a new EP of music for myself. You know, will it be called Tweaker? Stay tuned. I'm not so sure I'm going to call it that name. I may call it something new, but in effect, it's like writing a new Tweaker EP, like 5 or 6 songs. And then your thesis paper is about your process of, you know, what you did, you know, hands-on. And I'm trying to stay as analog as possible. That's my other thing. So all my racks I'm a huge analog compressor nerd. Nice. You know, Alan Smart, a few distressors, a couple 1176s, a couple LA2As, and then the console's analog too.
Oh, nice.
It's an SSL AWS, the first one, the 900. I got it from an old friend. Believe me, I mean, you know, but I love it. It's the greatest mixing board. Yeah. But you know, everything's more than 24 tracks. So we, you know, like hybrid mixing, I think is where we're all at. I don't know how you're mixing your stuff. I don't know if you do it analog or if you do everything in the box or if you have like a summing mixer or some combination of all that, you know. So I do like, you know, I submix everything down to 22 faders of stems usually. And then I print off the master bus, you know, using the bus compressor, you know, back into Pro Tools for the final print.
I used to do that, but my board is not as good as yours. So
what do you have?
A Mackie.
Don't even start me. What do you have, like a 32 8 bus?
Yeah. No, I have a 56 by 8.
What do you mean you have a 56?
The 32 and the 24 expander. They
made an expander?
It's the 32 channel Mackie is a 32 by 8, and then you can get an expander for it that's 24 that expands it to 56 channels.
I never knew that they made an expander for that thing.
Yeah. And so we've been using it ever since the process, and it's still the same.
My school, my A studio has a 32 8 bus in it. That's what I teach my students with.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, those mic pre's are loud and punchy, and that EQ they're, you know, that middle, like those, the frequencies on those 3 bands, it just works. There was something magical. I like that board better than the Ghost, which was the Soundcraft version of it at the time.
Yeah.
All my friends had 32/8 buses, and I was so jealous because I never could afford one back then.
It's really funny that legendary reggae producer Scientist was at my house one day, and he came into the studio and wanted to check the studio out. And I said, "Sorry about the board." And he said, "What are you talking about, Mom? This board," and he gave me the details, just like you did. The Mackie 32/8 is actually a pretty damn good board for what it is.
It's awesome. It has held up. It still sounds good.
Yeah.
I would rather have that than, you know, one of these new digital, you know, cheap boards, you know, that
For sure.
The pre's in it. It's got direct outs in it. I mean, it's got 8 buses.
Yeah.
You've got 6 ends. I mean, I could, you know, like, and I have used on tour, I always had a 1604 VLZ Pro. That was always like my stage mixer, always. Yeah. And then I've had a 1202 from time to time. Like I've always loved their stuff, you know. Yeah. Built like a freaking tank. You can throw it off a truck and it's not going to break on you.
They do. They last forever, apparently, too.
Yeah. I mean, it's 2020 and you're talking to 2 people with still.
Mine won't die.
I found mine in a closet because I had this digital board that was there before I got there, and it's garbage. And so I was like, I'm like, there's a guy, and I was rooting around a closet, and I found the Mackie, and I found they had a Tascam 24-channel 1/4-inch patch bay, to go with it and the whole thing. And I went, why are we not using this? So I turned one of my classes for like 3 weeks into a studio building class.
Nice.
Like we're going to tear every cable out of here. We're going to get rid of every piece of gear. And we're going to bring this Mackie out of the class. It has the meter bridge, everything.
That's awesome. How you learn. That's really how you learn. Set it up, do the wiring, and then start learning on that. And then
learning, yeah. If you don't know how to go pre and post on an aux fade, or sending out multiple buses, or just using direct outs from your, coming in. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a Mackie or a 100 input SSL. The theory of signal flow doesn't change.
Yeah,
it is. It's a science. So you learn the science and then you apply it. Go buy your Lamborghini, i.e. an API or a SSL later. But
I see API has just come out with a nice smaller version of their board. It's like 15 grand or something, but it's like Cyrus just got one. It's like a really, really nice little compact.
Really?
Yeah.
I know this one. It has like 2 500 slots in it, and
no, it has like 4 or 5 500 slots.
It does. Okay, I heard something because the box that they have is like 50K or something like that.
Yeah, it's cheaper. It's 15K.
Yeah,
and it's actually got all of the. I wish I could give you the specs, but look it up online. API 15K console. Definitely worth it.
If I still recorded more organic instruments like I used to, 15 years ago. Like I have a pair of APIs down here, Brent Averill's, old ones. API was always my favorite mic pre. I just thought they were the punchiest. They were great for drums.
For sure.
Maybe like one Neve channel for vocal and guitar or something like that. One 1176 clone or something. But I always liked API. I did a couple of records on an old API board out somewhere out in the deep valley of LA many times. Love that room. But I mostly mix or it's all synthesizer stuff. So, so most of what that board excels at, I would never take advantage of, unfortunately for me. It's funny how our careers take so many different paths over the course of, this is my nice summary now, kids tell I'm a teacher. So, it's like our lives take so many different turns that you never expect coming. I never thought about doing video games until, American offered me that. I never thought of, it started off, I just wanted to be a drummer and I wanted to be in a bus. And, certain things happen and you just you never know when Ginger's going to fall off a stage, put himself in a coma. And then for the next 7.5 years, you're now in Marilyn Manson. You just can't predict that kind of stuff. You can't I never finished college back in the 80s. So I went for a while and then Nine Inch Nails blew up and I was like, see ya. So when I went into teaching, the first thing I had to do was go back to my alma mater, Kent State, and, I had to go, I went online and I had to finish up my bachelor because, you know, you can't be hired as a teacher without a bachelor's degree. So that was the first thing I did. And now I'm doing a master's. Like, if you would have told me 20 years ago, like when I'm 50, I'm going to be getting a master's degree and I'm a professorship, I'd be like, dude, first of all, I'm going to be dead, you know, you know, what is that? Live fast, die young. You know, that was all of our philosophies back in New Orleans. Screw it, you know.
You did it the right way. You did it both.
But I know you just don't know. And I always tell people, it's like you can't predict it, and you have to be open minded to whatever comes your way. You know.
What's the school where you're at now?
It's called Calhoun Community College. It's the largest 2-year college in Alabama.
In Decatur, Alabama.
It's in Decatur, the main campus. There's actually 2 campuses, Huntsville and Decatur, but there's a third campus that's not even really listed. It's in downtown Decatur. That's an art center that we share with a 4-year university. And they only teach the 3rd and 4th year courses. So like we're like 1 and 2 and they're 3 and 4. And it's nothing but fine and performing arts. We have 2 buildings. So there's a fine arts building with every type of kiln and painting and everything for fine arts that you'd ever want. And then the back building is performing arts. We have 2 theaters. We have a black box and a recital hall, 2 recording studios, a jazz band room, private practice rooms scattered around the building. So I teach in that facility, but it's in Decatur, Alabama, which is 15 minutes south of Huntsville. But I live up closer to Huntsville.
So any of you that live in this region, let's hope that you will sign up for Chris's course in any which manner that you can. I think it would be interesting. I would love to sit in and see one of the classes.
I like teaching. You know, teaching's performing in a way. You know, you rehearse your songs or you rehearse your lecture. Your audience is your class.
Yeah.
When you get up in front of your class, just like in front of a crowd, you better make whatever it is you're presenting entertaining, or no one's going to pay attention to you. It's not that far removed from what we've done our whole lives, really. Yeah. Yeah. So
I think you've set a perfect example for somebody that would be getting into thinking about being a musician and seeing that there actually is a future.
There is. I mean, a lot of my students want to go like live sounds real big, you know, like in a typical year concert revenue, you know, that's how bands are all making their money, you know, is touring and you know, merch and stuff, because with the streaming, you know, album sales are what they are. You know, when I go to this board and when we do business day about Spotify, I write the $ 0.00038. And they're like, what is that? I'm like, that's how much you make every time someone plays your song on Spotify. I'm like, do the math. How many spins do you need to make $100? And they're like, I need like 1,400 spin. What? You know, they quickly, like, you see the light leave their eyes.
Yeah. Hopefully one day that will get looked at. And, you know,
it has to. I mean,
it would be after we die.
Yeah, it will be after we die for sure. But live sounds become such a thing, you know, that there's a lot of opportunities for students to, you know, like I tell my students all the time, if you're young and you want to travel, like, you know, focus on the live sound, you know, maybe perhaps live sound or doing tech work, like stage, you know, like backline tech. You have to be really smart to hook up, Kevin, your rig on stage. Your rig is insane. So is my rig for Tweaker, you know. So if you're good, if you can do that, you got a career forever. That band is long gone, but you'll be known as the guy that's a really good keyboard tech, and you'll get hired again and again and again.
That's right. That's like a couple of my friends. That's all they do. Yeah, but we never see them because they're always on tour.
I know, and they all have these nice houses because they just pocket all their per diems. Yeah. You don't have time to spend it, and then they're never home to enjoy their house. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but you know, so there's I don't fear for the future, really, you know, as far as, you know, the people go. You just have to be more open-minded and find all those other ways to make money at it, because there's a bunch of ways out there. It's just, but you got to work so hard, don't you? You know what I mean?
You've definitely proven that hard work pays off, Chris.
So I'm exhausted. I am permanently exhausted at this.
Well, you've done great, and I'm a fan, and it's been a pleasure touring with you and knowing.
I have to ask you one question before we go.
Okay.
New Skinny Puppy album and tour. Yes, no, and when?
No answer.
Really? You know,
Yeah,
like
I got to leave you in the dark on that because I'll tell you later.
okay.
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 Peace out to you,
All right,
brother.
man. It was great talking, and thanks everybody online.
Had an excellent time.
Thank you for tuning in, everybody.
Have a great day.
I'll email you, dude. It's good talking. We can catch up.
Later.
Right, take care.
Bye.